Here's the thing about these facts. None of them will change your life. They won't make you richer, smarter, or more prepared for anything. They're just there. Small, precise, slightly absurd pieces of information about money that you'll forget by morning. That's the point. Let them drift past like leaves on water. No need to hold on. Here's the first one. The first coins were made of electrum, a naturally occurring alloy of gold and silver, found in riverbeds in ancient Lydia. Electrum was a pale yellow metal that looked like gold but was harder and more durable, making it perfect for the first coins. The Lydians simply scooped it from the streams, stamped it with designs, and used it for trade. A US penny costs about 3.1 cents to make, which is more than it's worth, and it has cost more than a cent to produce every year since 2006. The government loses money on every penny it makes, a small loss that adds up to tens of millions of dollars each year. It's a coin that costs more to create than it is worth. The ridges on the edges of coins, called reeding, were originally designed to prevent people from shaving off small amounts of precious metal without detection. If you shaved the edge of a gold coin, it was obvious because the reeding would be missing. The reeding is a quiet security feature that has been used for centuries. There is a Canadian coin called the loonie because it features a loon on its reverse, and its heavier counterpart is the toonie, which has a bronze-colored center. The loonie was introduced in 1987, and the toonie followed in 1996, replacing the $2 bill. They are two of the most distinctive coins in the world. The 1943 steel penny is the only U.S. coin that a magnet will stick to, because it was made that way to save copper for World War II ammunition. The copper was needed for shell casings and other war materials, so the mint switched to steel coated in zinc. The steel pennies are a quiet reminder of a time when every resource was precious. A 1794 silver dollar sold for over $10 million in 2013, and it is considered the first silver dollar struck by the U.S. Mint. The coin is one of the most valuable in the world, not because of its silver content, but because of its history. It is a small piece of metal that has survived for over 2 centuries. The Royal Mint in the UK produces coins that are washed in detergent after minting to remove oil residue from the stamping process. The coins are then dried and inspected before they are released into circulation. It's a quiet step in the manufacturing process that most people never think about. In 1974, the U.S. Mint experimented with making pennies from aluminum, and about 1.5 million were made before the idea was abandoned. The aluminum pennies were lighter and cheaper to produce, but they were rejected because they could be confused with dimes. The experiment was a quiet failure. The smallest coin ever minted for circulation was the Nepalese silver coin from the 17th century, weighing just 0.01 grams. That's about the weight of a grain of rice, and it was so small that it was difficult to handle. It was a coin that could be lost in the palm of your hand. Coins in circulation lose about 0.001% of their weight per year due to friction and wear from handling. Over a century, a coin can lose a measurable amount of its metal, a quiet erosion that happens one touch at a time. The coin becomes lighter, smoother, and older with each passing year. The word coin comes from the Latin cuneus, meaning wedge because the dies used to stamp coins were wedge-shaped. The wedges were used to strike the blanks, impressing the design into the metal. It's a simple word for a simple object that has been used for millennia. There is a coin with a hole in the center, the Japanese 5-yen coin, and it's said to bring good luck, though we make no claims about such things. The hole in the center was originally designed to allow the coins to be strung together for easy carrying. It's a practical feature that has become a cultural symbol. U.S. paper currency is not made from paper at all, but from a blend of 75% cotton and 25% linen, which gives it a distinct feel. The fabric is specially treated to make it durable and resistant to wear, and it feels different from regular paper. You can feel the difference if you rub a bill between your fingers. The $100 bill is the most counterfeited denomination outside the U.S. and the most commonly shipped overseas. The bill is a target, because of its high value, and it is frequently reproduced by counterfeiters. It is a quiet cat-and-mouse game between the treasury and the forgers. Polymer banknotes, used in over 50 countries, are made from a type of plastic that can survive being accidentally washed in a washing machine. The notes are waterproof, tear-resistant, and they last much longer than paper notes. They are a quiet innovation that has made currency more durable. The average lifespan of a $1 bill is about 6.6 years, while a $100 bill lasts about 22.9 years because it changes hands less often. The higher the denomination, the longer it stays in circulation, as it is used less frequently for everyday purchases. The $100 bill is a quiet traveler. In 1933, the U.S. government recalled all gold certificates and made it illegal for citizens to own gold bullion or gold coins. The move was designed to stabilize the economy during the Great Depression, and it was a dramatic exercise of government power. The gold recall was a quiet confiscation that shocked the nation. The Canadian $1 bill was discontinued in 1989 and replaced by the loonie coin, saving the government about $150 million over 20 years. The coin was cheaper to produce and lasted much longer than the paper bill. It was a quiet cost-saving measure that became a national symbol. The portrait on U.S. currency has to be of a deceased person, and no living person can appear on U.S. paper money. This rule prevents living politicians from appearing on currency, a tradition that dates back to the 19th century. It is a quiet rule that has shaped the faces on our money. The $2 bill is still printed, and about 1.2 billion are in circulation, but most people think they're rare and hold on to them. The $2 bill is often collected rather than spent, which keeps it out of circulation. It is a quiet currency that lives in drawers and collections. The word dollar comes from the German thaler, a large silver coin from the 16th century, which itself was named after a town in Bohemia. The town of Joachimsthal gave its name to the coin, and the coin gave its name to the currency. It's a quiet connection between a small European town and the world's most dominant currency. Australia's first polymer banknotes in 1988 featured a design that, when heated to 60 degrees Celsius, shows a hidden watermark. The watermark is a security feature that is invisible until the note is heated, a clever innovation that deters counterfeiters. It's a quiet layer of protection that few people ever see. The Federal Reserve orders new currency each year based on projected demand, and in 2022, it ordered about 6.3 billion notes. That's a staggering number of bills, enough to fill several large warehouses. The notes are printed, counted, and shipped across the country in a quiet operation that never stops. The 1918 $500 bill featured John Marshall, the fourth Chief Justice, and the $1,000 bill featured Grover Cleveland. These large bills were used primarily for bank-to-bank transfers and were rarely seen by the public. They are now collector's items, a quiet remnant of a time when cash was used for everything. The word salary comes from the Latin salarium, which referred to the allowance given to Roman soldiers to buy salt. Salt was once so valuable that it was used as a form of payment, and that's how the word for regular pay came to be connected to those white crystals. The soldiers received their salt money, and over time, the term simply meant their regular wages. Bank comes from the Italian banco, meaning bench, because early Italian moneylenders conducted their business from wooden benches in marketplaces. They would sit on these benches with their coins and scales, offering loans and exchanging currencies for merchants passing through. The bench became a symbol of financial activity, and eventually, the word for the bench became the word for the institution itself. The word mint, in the sense of coin production, comes from the Latin moneta, which meant to warn, but we won't connect it to any mythological figure. The term was associated with the temple where coins were struck, and the connection was purely to the act of making money. The temple was simply a place where coins were produced, and the word carried forward into English as the place where currency is manufactured. The term cash has a surprisingly long journey. It comes from the Portuguese word caixa, meaning money box, which itself came from the Tamil word kasu, for a small coin. The Tamil word referred to a specific type of coin used in southern India, and Portuguese traders picked it up. From there, it traveled to English and became our word for money in general, particularly physical money you can hold. Pecuniary, the adjective meaning relating to money, comes from the Latin word pecunia, which derives from pecus, meaning cattle. This is because cattle were once used as a primary form of currency, a measure of wealth that you could see and touch and move from place to place. If you had a large herd, you were wealthy, and the word for that wealth remained even after coins replaced cows. The dollar sign, that simple S with a line through it, may have originated from the Spanish abbreviation for peso. The letters pes written over each other until they merged into one symbol. The Spanish peso was widely used in the Americas, and its abbreviation gradually morphed into the symbol we recognize today. Other theories exist, but the connection to the peso abbreviation is the most widely accepted. The word capital, in the sense of financial capital, comes from the Latin caput, meaning head, as in a head of cattle, which was another early form of wealth. If you had 100 head of cattle, you had 100 units of capital, and the word for that concept stayed with us. The same word gave us captain and capital city, all connected to the idea of the head, or the most important part. Fiscal comes from the Latin fiscus, meaning basket or purse. It referred to the emperor's treasury, which was literally a basket of money. The emperor's funds were kept in woven baskets, and the word for the basket became the word for the treasury itself. From there, it came to describe anything related to government revenue and spending. The Japanese yen symbol and the Chinese yuan symbol are actually the same character. They were both derived from the written character for round or circle, which referred to the round coins used in both countries. The symbol is written as yen, and it represents the same basic idea in both currencies, though the languages and the coins themselves are quite different. It's a shared symbol for two distinct currencies. Sterling, as in sterling silver or the British pound sterling, may come from the Old English word steorling, meaning starling, a small bird that appeared on early Norman coins. The bird was a common motif on coins of that period, and over time, the term for the bird became associated with the silver itself. It's a quiet connection between a small bird and one of the world's major currencies. The word fee comes from Old English feo, which meant cattle or property, once again linking money to livestock. The word survived the transition from cattle to coins and now refers to a payment for services. It's a small reminder that money, in its earliest forms, was often something you could see grazing in a field. Currency comes from the Latin currere, meaning to run or to flow, which is exactly what money does as it moves through an economy. It flows from hand to hand, from person to person, running through the system like water through a stream. The word captures the motion of money, its constant movement, and the fact that it only has value when it keeps moving. The word buck, as slang for a dollar, may come from the use of deerskins as currency in early American trade. A buck was a deerskin, and one buck was worth $1. The deerskin was a standard unit of trade in frontier areas, and the term persisted even after the coins and paper took over. It's a reminder that money can be almost anything as long as people agree on its value. Quid, the British slang for a pound, may come from the Latin phrase quid pro quo, meaning something for something. The phrase describes an exchange, a give and take, and that exchange became the nickname for the currency itself. It's a circular sort of name, money named after the act of trading money for something else. Dough as a term for money may come from the idea that bread was a basic staple of value, or from the Yiddish word for good. Either way, it's a soft, simple word for something that people work hard to get. It connects money to something every day, something you might find in a kitchen rather than a bank vault. Cheddar as a term for money comes from the idea that cheese was a form of payment in early English trade. Though this is not universally accepted, it's the most common explanation. The cheese was valuable, it was traded, and somehow the name of a particular cheese became a name for money. It's an odd connection, but language is full of such accidental links. Moolah, as a term for money, may come from the Maori word for mud, or from the Spanish muela, meaning millstone. The origins are uncertain, but the word has a pleasant, slightly silly sound that makes it perfect for casual use. It's a slang term that has no clear origin but has persisted for decades anyway. Bread, as a slang term for money, appears in the 1930s and was popularized in the US by criminal slang. Like dough, it connects money to food, to something essential, something you need to survive. The connection is ancient, but the specific term is relatively modern. Clams as a term for dollars may come from the use of clam shells as currency by Native American tribes along the coast. The shells were strung together and used for trade, and the name for the shell became a name for money in general. It's a coastal connection, a reminder that money can be washed up on a beach. Smackers, as a term for dollars, is thought to come from the sound of coins being placed on a table, that sharp, flat sound of metal on wood. It's a word that sounds like what it describes, a little bit of onomatopoeia in financial slang. The term has been around since the early 20th century, and it's still used casually today. Grand, as a term for $1,000, comes from the idea of grand, as in large, or from the French grand, for large. It's a simple way to say a large number, 1,000, without having to say all the zeros. It's a slang term that has become so common that it's almost standard. Benjamins, as a term for $100 bills, comes from the portrait of Benjamin Franklin on the note. He is one of the few non-presidents on US currency. The term is playful, a bit casual, and it only works for that one denomination. You wouldn't say Benjamins for any other bill. Greenbacks as a term for US currency comes from the green ink used on the back of bills, a term that dates back to the Civil War era. The greenbacks were originally issued as demand notes, and the color became so distinctive that it became a nickname for all US currency. It's a simple description, but it has lasted for over 150 years. Dead presidents as a slang term for US currency refers to the portraits of deceased presidents on the bills. All of the people on US paper money are deceased, which is a requirement of the design. The term is a bit macabre, but it's also accurate and slightly affectionate. It's a reminder that money carries the faces of the dead. Scratch, as a slang term for money, may come from the idea of scratching out a living, or from the sound of a pen scratching a check. It's a rough, working-class term, a bit gritty, and it suggests money that is earned through hard work. It's not a fancy term, but it gets the job done. Geld is a Yiddish term for money that has entered English, particularly in the context of Hanukkah geld, small coins given as gifts. The word has a soft, warm sound, and it's often used affectionately. It's one of many loanwords that have enriched the language of money. Wonga is a British slang term for money of uncertain origin. It may come from Romany or from a brand name, but no one is quite sure. It's a cheerful, slightly silly word that has been in use since the 1980s. It's the kind of term that sounds like it should have a clear history, but it doesn't. Dosh is another British slang term for money, possibly derived from the word dos, meaning a bed or a nap, or from an older term for a small coin. It's a short, punchy word that has been around for decades, and it's still used in casual conversation today. It's the kind of word that sounds like it's always been there. Lolly is British slang for money, probably derived from the word lollipop. No one is entirely sure why. It's a sweet, playful term, a bit childish, and it suggests money as something small and pleasant. It's not a serious term, but it has its place in the casual language of finance. Moolah, or moolah, as we mentioned earlier, the spelling varies. is a term that sounds like it should have a clear origin, but it remains a mystery. It may come from a fictional language or from a nonsense word that just caught on. It's a fun word to say, and that may be its only purpose. Rhinoceros was once slang for money in the 18th century. The connection is unclear, but it's a wonderfully odd term. It may have come from the high value of rhino horn, or from a pun on the word rhino, meaning something valuable. It's a term that has long since fallen out of use, but it's a reminder of how creative language can be. Beans, as a term for money, appears in American slang, and it may come from the use of beans as a form of payment in early colonial times. Beans were a staple crop. They could be stored and traded, and they had value. The term persisted even after coins and paper took over. Chicken feed, as a term for a small amount of money, a very small amount, comes from the idea of feeding chickens with cheap grain. It's a humble term, and it suggests money that is barely worth counting. It's the opposite of big bucks, and it's been in use for over a century. In the United States, it is perfectly legal to cut a coin into pieces and use those pieces as money, as long as the pieces are worth less than the original coin. If you take a quarter and cut it in half, each half is technically worth 12.5 cents, and you could use them that way, though no one actually does. The law only prohibits mutilating coins with the intent to defraud, not with the intent to make change. It is illegal to use a photograph of U.S. currency for advertising purposes in a way that looks like real money, but the Secret Service enforces this rule quite loosely. The law is designed to prevent counterfeiting, not to stop every advertisement that features a picture of cash. In practice, most ads that use images of money are fine, as long as they don't look too realistic. In Canada, it is illegal to pay for a transaction with more than 25 pennies, though pennies are no longer produced in Canada anyway. The law was designed to prevent people from paying large debts with huge piles of nearly worthless coins, but it's now largely irrelevant. You can still use pennies if you have them, but you can't use too many of them at once. In Australia, businesses are not required to accept cash at all. They can choose to be card-only operations if they prefer. This is a relatively recent development, and it means that cash is becoming less and less useful in daily transactions. If you want to buy something with cash in Australia, you might find that the store simply won't take it. In the UK, Scottish banknotes are not legal tender anywhere in the UK, not even in Scotland itself, but they are still widely accepted. The term legal tender has a very specific legal meaning, and Scottish notes don't qualify, but that doesn't stop people from using them every day. It's a strange legal quirk that has persisted for centuries. The U.S. Treasury has the legal authority to recall any coin or bill at any time, but this has only happened once with any real scale: the recall of gold certificates in 1933. People were required to turn in their gold certificates for regular paper money, and the gold itself was effectively nationalized. It's a reminder that the government has a lot of control over money that people don't always think about. It is legal to destroy U.S. paper currency as long as it is not done to defraud, though many forms of mutilation are technically considered defacement. You can burn a dollar bill, or tear it up, or use it as a bookmark, and that's perfectly legal as long as you're not trying to pass off the pieces as money. The law is about intent, not about the physical act of destruction. In Switzerland, it is illegal to pay with more than 100 coins of the same denomination in a single transaction, which is a common law in many countries. The Swiss law is intended to prevent people from using coins as a form of harassment or obstruction, particularly in large transactions. It's a practical rule that keeps payments from becoming absurdly cumbersome. The U.S. Secret Service was originally created in 1865 specifically to combat counterfeit currency, and protecting the president was added to their duties later. The agency was founded during the Civil War, when counterfeiting was rampant, and its mission was to protect the integrity of U.S. currency. It wasn't until after the assassination of President McKinley in 1901 that the Secret Service began providing full-time presidential protection. In Japan, It is legal to pay a debt of any amount in coins, but courts have ruled that doing so in 1 yen coins could be considered an abusive process. If someone tries to pay a large debt with thousands of small coins, the court can intervene and require a more reasonable form of payment. It's a sensible rule that prevents people from using the law to cause trouble. The euro has strict rules about how much of its design can be reproduced, with counterfeit deterrence guidelines that limit reproduction to no more than 75% of the note. If you reproduce more than that, you risk being accused of counterfeiting, even if your intention is harmless. The rules are detailed and precise, and they apply to anyone who wants to use images of euro banknotes. In 2006, a law in the US made it illegal to melt down pennies or nickels for their metal value, because the metal in those coins is worth more than the face value of the coin itself. The law was passed to prevent people from buying up coins and melting them down for scrap, which would have been profitable but would have destroyed the currency. It's a classic example of a law responding to an unforeseen market incentive. In the United States, it is illegal to use a fake or replica coin in a vending machine, even if the coin is clearly not real. The law is designed to prevent fraud, but it also covers any attempt to deceive a machine, even if no human is involved. Vending machines are considered instruments of commerce, and deceiving one is a form of theft. In the UK, it is illegal to use a coin that has been clipped or shaved down. That is, if the coin has been reduced in weight or size, it is no longer legal tender. Clipping was a common form of theft in the days when coins were made of precious metals, and the law has evolved to prevent it. Even today, a coin that has been physically altered is not considered valid. In many European countries, it is illegal to use a credit card for a transaction of less than €1, though this varies by country. The rule is designed to prevent merchants from losing money on transaction fees, and it encourages people to use cash for small purchases. It's a practical rule that has become common across the Eurozone. In Russia, it is illegal to pay for a transaction with coins that have been defaced or stamped with any kind of message, as the coins are considered state property. The law is part of a broader effort to protect the integrity of the currency, and it applies to all forms of mutilation. Even a small scratch or mark can render a coin invalid. In Singapore, it is illegal to use a coin that has been cut or perforated in any way, even if the coin is still recognizable. The law is strict, and it applies to all coins, regardless of their denomination. It's a way of maintaining the visual integrity of the currency and preventing any kind of alteration. In some parts of the United States, it is illegal to use a slot machine that accepts coins without having a proper license, and that law applies to any coin-operated device. The law is about gambling, but it also covers any machine that accepts coins and gives something in return. It's a broad law that catches many different kinds of devices. In Canada, the Royal Canadian Mint has a policy that any coin that is mutilated or damaged to the point where it is no longer recognizable can be exchanged for a new coin at the mint. The policy is designed to help people who have accidentally damaged their currency, and it's a generous approach to coin management. It's one of the few ways that damaged coins can be replaced without any cost. In Japan, there is a law that requires all coins to be accepted as legal tender for any amount up to 20 times their face value, which is a common rule in many countries. The rule is designed to prevent people from using coins to pay large debts, but it also ensures that coins are always useful for small transactions. It's a practical balance between convenience and practicality. In France, it is illegal to use a coin that has been painted or otherwise altered, even if the coin is still clearly recognizable. The law is part of a broader effort to preserve the integrity of the currency, and it applies to all forms of modification. A painted coin is considered to have been defaced, and it loses its status as legal tender. In the United Kingdom, the Bank of England has the authority to withdraw any banknote from circulation at any time, and this has happened several times in the past. When a new design is introduced, old notes are gradually withdrawn, and they eventually become worthless. It's a quiet process that happens every few decades. In the United States, there is a law that allows the president to recall all currency in an emergency, though this has never been used. The law is part of the broad powers granted to the executive branch, and it's a reminder of how much control the government has over money. It's a power that sits on the books, but it has never been exercised. In Sweden, it is illegal to refuse to accept coins as payment, even if the amount is small, though there are some exceptions. The law is designed to protect consumers and to ensure that coins retain their value as a form of payment. It's a measure that keeps cash relevant in a country that is moving rapidly toward digital payments. In Hungary, it is illegal to use a coin that has been damaged in any way, even if the damage is minor, and the coin must be exchanged at a bank. The law is strict, and it applies to all coins, regardless of their denomination. A bent or scratched coin is considered to have lost its value as legal tender. In India, there is a law that allows the government to demonetize currency notes at any time, which they did in 2016 with a significant impact. The law was used to withdraw high-denomination notes from circulation, and it caused chaos for a few weeks. It's a reminder that governments have a lot of power over money, and that power can be exercised suddenly. In Brazil, it is illegal to use a coin that has been glued or attached to another object, and the coin loses its status as legal tender. The law is designed to prevent people from creating counterfeit coins by attaching two pieces together. It's a specific rule for a specific type of fraud. In Switzerland, it is illegal to use a coin that has been drilled or pierced in any way, and the coin must be replaced at a bank. The law is strict, and it applies to all coins, regardless of their denomination. A coin with a hole in it is considered damaged and invalid. In South Africa, there is a law that requires the government to accept any coin as legal tender for its face value, even if the coin is no longer in circulation. The law is designed to protect people who still have old coins, and it ensures that they can always exchange them for new ones. It's a generous policy that keeps old currency valuable. In New Zealand, it is illegal to use a coin that has been painted or otherwise altered, and the coin is considered invalid. The law is part of a broader effort to protect the integrity of the currency, and it applies to all forms of modification. A painted coin cannot be used, even if the painting is small and harmless. In Thailand, there is a law that allows the government to confiscate any coin that has been defaced, even if the defacement is minor. The law is designed to protect the royal images that often appear on Thai coins, and it's strictly enforced. It's a law that reflects the cultural importance of the monarchy. In South Africa, it is illegal to export certain coins from the country, particularly coins that are considered cultural heritage items. The law is designed to protect the country's cultural artifacts, and it applies to coins that have historical significance. It's a measure that preserves coins as part of the country's heritage. The largest banknote ever printed by the United States was the $100,000 bill, but it was never circulated for public use. It was used only for transactions between Federal Reserve banks, a kind of internal accounting tool that most people never even knew existed. Woodrow Wilson appears on its face, and the bills were never handed to ordinary citizens. The smallest banknote ever issued was the 10 bani note from Romania in 1917, measuring just 2.75 by 3.86 inches. That's smaller than a typical business card, and it's a reminder that money can come in almost any size. The tiny note was printed during wartime when materials were scarce and every resource was carefully conserved. The first credit card was the Diners Club card, introduced in 1950, and it was initially accepted at just 27 restaurants in New York. The idea was that a businessman could have a single card to pay for meals instead of carrying cash everywhere. It took a few years for the concept to catch on, but now credit cards are everywhere. The first ATM was installed in London in 1967 at a Barclays branch, and it dispensed a maximum of £10 per withdrawal. The machine was a simple device, and it used a special check with radioactive ink to authenticate the user. It was a revolutionary idea that changed how people access their money. The most counterfeited currency in the world is the US $100 bill, but the second most counterfeited is the British £20 note. Both are high-value denominations that are widely used and widely copied. The battle between counterfeiters and currency designers has been going on for centuries. The first coin to bear a date was the Liberty Head cent in 1793, though it was not the first US coin. That was the half dismy from 1792. The date on the coin was a simple innovation that allowed people to see when the coin was struck. It became a standard feature of coins around the world. The largest coin in circulation today is the 1-ounce Canadian gold maple leaf, though it is bullion, not legal tender for its face value. The coin contains an ounce of pure gold, and its actual worth is far more than its face value. It's a coin that is more valuable for its metal than for its denomination. The first European banknotes were issued in Sweden in 1661, and they were called kreditivsedlar. They were quickly overissued and caused inflation. The Swedish experiment with paper money was one of the first in Europe, and it didn't go smoothly. The notes lost value quickly, and the government had to intervene. The U.S. Treasury has an underground vault in Fort Knox containing about 147 million ounces of gold, or about 4,600 tons. That's a staggering amount of gold, and it's stored in a heavily guarded facility that few people ever see. The vault itself is a massive structure buried in the Kentucky hills. The first official currency of the United States was the Spanish dollar, and it was legal tender until 1857. The Spanish dollar was widely used in the American colonies and early United States, and it was the model for the US dollar. The connection between the two currencies is a quiet piece of American financial history. The world's first paper money was issued in China during the Tang Dynasty, but it was not widely used until the Song Dynasty in the 11th century. The Chinese invented paper money as a way to avoid carrying heavy metal coins, and it was a brilliant innovation that took centuries to spread. The rest of the world eventually caught on. The largest single-denomination note ever printed for a country was the $100 trillion note from Zimbabwe, which was worth about 40 US cents at its issue. That's a staggering denomination for a note that was barely worth the paper it was printed on. It's a powerful symbol of hyperinflation. The first millionaire in the United States was a fur trader named John Jacob Astor, who started with beaver pelts and ended with vast real estate holdings in Manhattan. His wealth came from the fur trade, and he built a fortune that was almost unimaginable for the time. His story is a reminder that wealth can come from unlikely sources. The first stock exchange was established in Amsterdam in 1602, and it was created by the Dutch East India Company. People have been trading shares and panicking about their value ever since. It was the first place where people could buy and sell pieces of companies. The first recorded tax in history was in ancient Egypt, and it was on cooking oil. The tax was a small levy on a basic household necessity, and it shows that governments have always found ways to raise revenue. Nothing escapes the taxman, not even your cooking oil. The first ATM in the world was installed in London in 1967, and the user authenticated himself with a check dipped in radioactive ink. Banks have always been a little weird with their technology, and this was just the beginning. The ATM has evolved a lot since then. The world's first recorded economic bubble wasn't tulip mania, but rather a real estate bubble in ancient Rome. Humans have always been a little silly around property and investment. It's a pattern that repeats itself throughout history. The first credit card was born from a forgotten dinner bill. A man left his wallet at home and vowed never to feel that embarrassment again. So he invented the Diners Club card, and the rest is history. It's a reminder that necessity is the mother of invention. The largest denomination ever printed was the $100 trillion note in Zimbabwe, which wasn't enough to buy a loaf of bread at the height of inflation. It's a stark example of what happens when money loses all value. The note is now a collector's item. The first known form of money was cattle. Wealth literally mooed, and inflation meant your herd got frisky. It's a simple and elegant form of currency, and it reminds us that money doesn't have to be complicated. It just has to be valuable. The first paper money started in China in the 7th century because merchants got tired of carrying heavy bars of metal, proof that laziness fuels innovation and that people will always seek a more convenient way to trade. The Chinese invented paper money, and the world followed. The first millionaire in the United States, John Jacob Astor, started with beaver pelts and ended with Manhattan real estate. That arc tells you everything about compounding and the power of smart investments. He traded in furs and built a real estate empire. The first recorded tax was on cooking oil in ancient Egypt, and it's a reminder that governments have always looked for ways to raise money. No commodity was too small to tax, and the Egyptians were particularly creative. It's a lesson in fiscal policy that still applies today. The first stock market was in Amsterdam in 1602, and people have been panic selling ever since. It's a tradition that has continued for over 400 years, and it shows no signs of slowing down. The patterns of human behavior remain remarkably consistent. The world's first economic bubble was Roman real estate, not tulips, and it shows that humans have always been a little silly around property. The cycle of boom and bust is as old as civilization itself. It's a pattern that keeps repeating. The first ATM was installed in London in 1967, and it was a revolutionary step in banking. It allowed people to access their money at any time, which was unheard of before. The ATM has become an indispensable part of modern life. The first credit card was invented in 1950, and it was accepted at only 27 restaurants in New York. The concept was slow to catch on, but it eventually transformed how we pay for things. It's a classic example of an idea that seemed minor at the time. The first paper money in Europe was issued in Sweden in 1661, and it was quickly overissued, leading to inflation. The Swedes learned the hard way that paper money requires careful management. Their experiment was a cautionary tale for other countries. The first official currency of the United States was the Spanish dollar, and it was used for decades before the US minted its own coins. It's a reminder that the United States didn't always have its own currency. The Spanish dollar was the standard for a long time. The largest coin in circulation is the Canadian gold maple leaf, which is worth far more than its face value. It's a coin that is more valuable for its metal than its denomination, and it's a favorite among collectors. It's a beautiful coin with a simple design. The smallest banknote ever issued was the Romanian 10 bani note, which measured just 2.75 by 3.86 inches. It's a tiny piece of paper that was printed during a time of crisis. It's a reminder that money can come in any size, no matter how small. The distinctive smell of money is not just in your imagination. It's a complex chemical mixture. Freshly printed banknotes carry the scent of ink, cotton, and the sizing agents used in the paper-making process, while circulated bills absorb everything they encounter. A used dollar bill contains over 100 volatile organic compounds, including traces of soap, leather, sweat, and even bacteria. The green ink on US currency contains a dye that fluoresces under ultraviolet light, a feature used to detect counterfeits. When you shine a UV light on a genuine bill, the paper remains dark while the security thread glows a specific color. It's a simple test that cashiers use every day, though most people never see it in action. Banknotes can carry over 3,000 types of bacteria, and the most common ones are those found on human skin. A dollar bill passes through dozens of hands in its lifetime, and each person leaves behind a microscopic trace of themselves. It's a quiet reminder that money is one of the most touched objects in the world. US paper currency is made from a blend of 75% cotton and 25% linen, which gives it a distinct feel that you can recognize by touch alone. The cotton fibers make the bills more durable than standard paper, and the linen adds strength and a slight texture. You can feel the difference if you compare it to a piece of regular paper. The red and blue fibers in US currency are not printed on the surface. They are embedded in the paper during the manufacturing process. These tiny security threads are one of the oldest anti-counterfeiting measures, and they have been used for over a century. You can see them if you look closely, but they are almost impossible to replicate. A single banknote can hold up to 50 different chemical compounds from the environment, including traces of caffeine, nicotine, and even cocaine. A study in the 1990s found that nearly 80% of bills in major U.S. cities contained trace amounts of cocaine, though modern bills are tested less frequently. It's a strange fact about what money picks up as it travels. The distinctive smell of money comes from the breakdown of cellulose and lignin in the cotton-linen blend, plus trace amounts of skin oils and environmental contaminants. When a bill is fresh, it smells like ink and clean cotton. When it's been in circulation for a while, it smells like everything it has touched. The scent is a history of where the bill has been. A pound of U.S. currency contains about 454 paper bills of any denomination because they all weigh exactly 1 gram each. This standardization makes it easy to count large amounts of cash by weight, though it's not a method used very often. The consistency is a result of careful manufacturing control. The ink on a U.S. bill is magnetic, containing small amounts of iron oxide, which is used as an anti-counterfeiting feature. This magnetic property allows high-speed currency sorting machines to detect and sort genuine bills from counterfeits. It's one of many invisible security features built into the design. Euro notes are made from 100% cotton fiber, making them more durable than the linen-cotton blend used in U.S. notes. The cotton fibers are longer and stronger, which means euro notes last longer in circulation than many other currencies. It's a small design choice that adds years to the life of a banknote. Banknotes lose about 1 to 2% of their weight over their lifetime due to the loss of fibers and ink particles from handling. Every time a bill is folded or rubbed, tiny fragments break off, and the bill becomes slightly lighter. It's a slow erosion that eventually sends the bill to the shredder. The average banknote in the US is touched by about 40 to 50 people per year, though in some countries with smaller populations it can be over 100. Each touch adds a layer of oils and microbes, and the bill carries the fingerprints of everyone who has held it. It's a quiet exchange that happens millions of times every day. Copper coins have a distinct metallic smell that actually comes from your skin. When you touch copper, the oils in your hands react with the metal to create the odor. The smell you associate with pennies is not coming from the coin itself, but from the chemical reaction between the metal and your body. It's a strange fact that makes the smell of coins deeply personal. Gold coins have almost no smell at all, because gold is chemically inert and does not react with skin oils or the environment. The lack of odor is one of the reasons gold has been valued for so long. It doesn't tarnish, corrode, or change over time. It's a metal that stays exactly the same, century after century. Silver coins develop a distinctive smell as they tarnish. The reaction between silver and sulfur compounds in the air produces silver sulfide, which has a subtle metallic scent. That faint smell is the result of a chemical reaction that has been occurring for as long as silver has been mined and minted. It's a quiet reminder that money is never really static. Paper money loses its new smell after about 3 to 6 months of circulation, depending on how often it changes hands. The fresh, clean scent of new bills is replaced by the accumulated odors of wallets, hands, and cash registers. Eventually, the bill smells like the world it has been traveling through. A single $1 bill contains about 1.5 grams of cotton and 0.5 grams of linen fiber, the same material used in high-quality clothing. The cotton gives the bill a soft, fabric-like feel, while the linen adds strength and durability. It's a piece of clothing that you can spend. Polymer banknotes, used in over 50 countries, are made from a type of plastic that can survive being accidentally washed in a washing machine. Unlike paper notes, polymer bills are waterproof and resistant to tearing, and they last much longer in circulation. They also have a distinct, slightly waxy smell that is different from paper money. French perfumer Marc Vom Ende spent 6 months recreating the smell of freshly minted money and another 8 months to capture the scent of used bills. His research involved extracting the volatile chemicals from circulated currency using activated charcoal, and his final formula was so accurate that testers recognized it immediately. The smell of money can be bottled. The ancient Roman emperor Vespasian is credited with the phrase pecunia non olet, which means money has no odor. He was defending a tax on urine collected from public toilets, and he asked his son whether the coins smelled of the source. The phrase has been used ever since to argue that money is money, regardless of where it comes from. In Chinese culture, money has long been described as having a copper stench, or tongchou, the idea that wealth carries a negative, unpleasant smell. In the 2nd century, a wealthy official named Cui Lie was mocked for buying his position with 5 million copper coins, and the term became a standard insult. It's a cultural association that has persisted for nearly 2,000 years. American entrepreneur Patrick McCarthy developed a perfume called Liquid Money in 2000, designed to capture the scent of U.S. currency for men and women. The fragrance included notes of cotton, soap, ink, and musk, and it sold for about $50 a bottle. It was an attempt to bottle the smell of success. An artist named Mike Boucher commissioned a perfume company to create the exact scent of used U.S. banknotes, and he planned to diffuse it throughout a gallery as an artwork. The scent was made by extracting the volatile compounds from circulated bills, and the piece was priced at $750,000. It's a reminder that the smell of money has become a commodity itself. Artist Cecil Tolas created an installation using the scent of vanilla as a representation of money, because vanilla has been used as a form of currency in various cultures. Her installation, Va Nil used interconnected pipes to circulate vanilla scents, representing the flow of money through the global economy. It was a sensory exploration of wealth and value. In ancient China, spices like pepper and sapanwood were used to pay soldiers and officials, effectively making money smell like food and medicine. After the voyages of Zheng He in the 15th century, the Ming government converted silk and cloth payments into pepper and sapanwood, creating a fragrant currency system. The smell of money was literally the smell of spices. The sensory heritage law in France protects the smell of manure and the sound of roosters as part of the country's rural heritage. While this is not directly about money, it shows how smells can become legally protected because of their economic and cultural value. The smell of manure can be a sign of agricultural wealth, and that wealth is worth protecting. The Principal Odor Map, a scientific model that predicts how molecules smell, can now identify about 500,000 synthetic odors. This technology might eventually allow us to digitize smells and recreate the exact scent of any currency, past or present. The smell of money could one day be stored on a computer like a song or a movie. When you handle a coin, it absorbs a tiny amount of oil from your skin, and that oil is transferred to every coin you touch after it. Your fingerprints, your scent, your skin cells, all of them are left behind on the metal and paper you spend. Every transaction is a tiny exchange of human material. The smell of money is so distinctive that perfume companies, artists, and scientists have all tried to capture it for different reasons. It's a scent that represents value, aspiration, and sometimes obsession, and it has been studied across cultures and centuries. And yet, for most people, the smell of money is just the smell of everyday life. The smell of a freshly minted coin is almost non-existent. It's the copper or silver, and neither has a strong odor on its own. But place that coin in a warm hand for a few seconds, and it will have a smell. The money needs you to create its scent, and somewhere, in a wallet or a cash register or a pocket, a bill is picking up the scents of the day: coffee, hand sanitizer, the leather of a purse, the warmth of a hand. It will carry those odors to the next person and the next, adding to its invisible history. By the time it reaches the bank shredder, it will have smelled 1,000 different lives. $1 million in $1 bills weighs about 2,204 pounds, just over 1 ton, and would fill a large suitcase or a small trunk. If you tried to carry that much in singles, you would need a cart or a very strong friend. The weight is surprisingly heavy for something that could also fit in a briefcase if you used larger bills. $1 million in $100 bills weighs about 22 pounds. light enough to carry in a small bag or briefcase. The $100 bills are far more efficient in terms of weight, and that's why large transactions are almost never done in small denominations. You could lift $1 million easily if it's in hundreds, but you'd need a forklift if it's all in ones. Every US banknote, no matter the denomination, weighs exactly 1 gram, so there are about 454 notes in a single pound of currency. This standardization means that a pound of $1 bills is worth the same as a pound of $100 bills in terms of weight, but the value is vastly different. The consistency is the result of careful manufacturing controls that have been in place for over a century. The total weight of all US coins in circulation is about 1.5 million tons, the equivalent of roughly 250,000 elephants standing together. That's an enormous amount of metal, and it's spread out across millions of pockets, cash registers, and coin jars across the country. The coins are everywhere, and their collective weight is almost unimaginable. A roll of 50 pennies weighs about 125 grams, the same weight as a standard bar of soap. If you've ever held a roll of pennies, you've held something that weighs about the same as something you use in the shower every day. It's a small, ordinary weight for a small, ordinary object. The average US coin weighs about 5 grams, which means there are about 91 coins to a pound. This is a rough average, since pennies are lighter than quarters and nickels are heavier than dimes. But if you grab a handful of mixed coins, you'll have roughly this many per pound. $1 trillion in $100 bills would weigh about 22 million pounds, or about 11,000 tons, and would fill a significant portion of a large warehouse. That's a number that is almost impossible to visualize, but it's roughly the weight of a small ship. The sheer weight of $1 trillion is a reminder of just how much money that really is. The weight of all US currency in circulation, both coins and paper, is about 1.1 million tons, a figure that includes all the bills and coins out there in the world. That's the weight of about 2 Empire State Buildings, or roughly the mass of a small mountain. It's a staggering amount of physical material, all of it moving through the economy every day. A stack of $101 bills is exactly 0.43 inches thick, so $1 million in $1 bills would be a stack about 358 feet tall. That's taller than a 30-story building, and it would be an impressive sight to see. The height of $1 million in ones is a visualization that makes the number feel real. $1 billion in $100 bills would weigh about 22,000 pounds, or 11 tons, and would fit on a standard wooden pallet. That's a manageable amount of weight for a forklift, and it's roughly the size of a large piece of furniture. $1 billion in hundreds is surprisingly compact. The weight of the gold in Fort Knox is about 4,600 tons, the equivalent of about 1,000 African elephants. That gold is stored in a heavily guarded vault, and it represents a significant portion of the US gold reserves. It's a massive amount of gold, and it's been sitting in that vault for decades. A single penny weighs 2.5 grams, so 1,000 pennies weigh 2.5 kilograms, or about 5.5 pounds. That's a manageable weight for a jar full of pennies, and it's a common way for people to save their change. The weight of 1,000 pennies is surprisingly heavy for such a small amount of money. A $5 gold piece, a coin no longer in circulation, weighs about 296 thousandths of an ounce, which is roughly 8.4 grams. To balance that coin on a scale, you would need about 6.5 $1 bills, because the bills are so light. It's a strange comparison that shows how different forms of money can weigh vastly different amounts. The weight of all the cash in the world, all the coins and banknotes on the planet, is estimated at about 7.56 billion kilograms, which is roughly the weight of 20,000 fully loaded Boeing 747s. That's the total mass of all the physical money that exists, spread across every country and every currency. It's a number that includes everything from the smallest coin to the largest banknote. In the early 20th century, a Treasury official calculated how much money an average person could lift, using 200 pounds as a standard. In $1 bills, 200 pounds would be worth about $71,111, not a fortune, but a decent amount. In $1,000 bills, £200 would be worth over $71 million, a fortune by any standard. The total weight of all US coins in circulation is estimated at about 19.89 billion kilograms, or roughly 43 billion pounds, an enormous amount of metal distributed across the country. That weight comes from hundreds of billions of coins, each one adding a tiny amount to the total. It's a number that is almost impossible to conceptualize. In 1910, a newspaper article noted that $101 bills weigh 4.5 ounces and that a $5 gold piece weighs about 296 thousandths of an ounce. The comparison shows just how light paper money is compared to coins made of precious metal. It's a reminder that money has changed dramatically over the past century. The largest denomination of paper money ever printed in the US was the $100,000 bill, which was used only for official transactions between Federal Reserve banks. If you could lift 200 pounds of those bills, you would have over $711 million, enough to fund a small trust. That's a staggering amount of money for something that most people have never even seen. The weight of a dollar bill doesn't change significantly with normal use, though it can pick up dirt and oils that add a tiny amount of mass over time. A fresh bill weighs exactly 1 gram, but a bill that has been in circulation for years might weigh a fraction of a gram more. It's a small difference, but it's a reminder that money carries the world with it. All US bills, regardless of their monetary value, weigh the same, so a $1 bill and a $100 bill are identical in weight. This standardization is intentional, and it makes it easy to count bills by weight, though it also means that a stack of ones and a stack of hundreds of the same thickness have vastly different values. The weight of money is independent of its worth. A stack of currency 1 mile high would contain more than 14.5 million banknotes, which is a staggering number of bills piled up to an incredible height. That height is roughly the cruising altitude of a commercial airplane, and it would take a very tall building to reach that height. The number of bills in a mile-high stack is a reminder of just how many banknotes exist. The Federal Reserve estimates that about 1/2 to 2/3 of the value of all US currency in circulation is outside the United States, which means that a significant portion of American money is physically located in other countries. That money is often held as a store of value, and it adds to the global weight of US currency. It's a fact that makes the weight of money a global phenomenon. The weight of a coin is carefully controlled at the mint, and each denomination has a specific weight that is maintained with remarkable precision. The penny weighs 2.5 grams, the nickel weighs 5 grams, the dime weighs 2.268 grams, and the quarter weighs 5.67 grams, each one a carefully calibrated piece of metal. These weights have remained consistent for decades, and they are part of what makes coins feel familiar in your hand. The total mass of all US banknotes in circulation is estimated at about 52.7 million kilograms, or roughly 116 million pounds, a weight that is spread across billions of individual notes. That weight is the physical manifestation of the US monetary system, and it includes everything from $1 bills to $100 bills. It's a staggering amount of paper and cotton. If you could lift 200 pounds of $500 bills, you would have over $35 million, a sum that would make you wealthy beyond most people's dreams. The $500 bill was discontinued in 1969, but it was a real denomination that was once used for large transactions. It's a reminder that the weight of money depends entirely on the denomination. The weight of money has been a subject of fascination for over a century, with newspaper articles from as early as 1910 calculating how much an average person could lift in different denominations. These calculations showed that the denomination matters as much as the amount. A person could lift a fortune in large bills, but barely a few $1,000s in coins. It's a simple fact that has entertained people for generations. Inflation is the quiet thief of purchasing power, a slow erosion that happens so gradually that most people barely notice it until years have passed. Since the Federal Reserve was created in 1913, the US dollar has lost about 97% of its purchasing power, meaning that what a dollar could buy then, it now takes about $33 to buy the same thing. It's a slow, steady decline that has been happening for over a century. A dollar from 1920 could buy about what $13.50 can buy today, which means that single dollar has lost about 92% of its value over the past century. That's not a sudden crash, but a long, gentle slide that has continued decade after decade. The dollar of the 1920s was made of gold. The dollar of today is made of faith. The fastest hyperinflation in recorded history occurred in Hungary in 1946, where prices doubled every 15 hours. That meant that the value of money was cut in half more than once a day, faster than most people could spend their wages. The government printed such enormous denominations that the notes had more zeros than most people could count, and the currency became virtually worthless. Zimbabwe experienced hyperinflation so extreme in 2008 that prices doubled every single day, and a loaf of bread cost 1.6 trillion Zimbabwe dollars at its peak. The government was printing money faster than it could distribute it, and the currency lost value so quickly that people had to spend their wages the same day they were paid. The Zimbabwean dollar eventually collapsed entirely, and the country adopted foreign currencies instead. The German Weimar Republic experienced such severe inflation in 1923 that people used banknotes as wallpaper or kindling because the paper was worth more as fuel than as money. Children played with stacks of notes in the streets, and people carried their wages in wheelbarrows to the shops. The currency had become so worthless that it was cheaper to burn it than to buy firewood. In 1971, the US dollar was officially removed from the gold standard, meaning it was no longer backed by physical metal and was free to float based on supply and demand. Before that, every dollar was redeemable for a fixed amount of gold. After that, the dollar became a fiat currency, backed only by the faith and credit of the US government. It was one of the most significant changes in monetary history. The average inflation rate in the US from 1913 to 2024 has been about 3.2% per year, which means prices have roughly doubled every 22 years. That's a slow rate, but over a lifetime, it adds up significantly. What cost $1 when your grandparents were young now costs about $33. It's a gentle, persistent pressure that affects everyone. A $100 bill from 1950 would have the purchasing power of about $1,300 today. It has lost about 92% of its value over 74 years. That's not because the bill itself is worth less, but because everything else costs more. The bill still says $100, but it buys a fraction of what it used to. The inflation rate in Venezuela reached 10 million% in 2019, with prices doubling every 26 hours. The government printed so much money that the currency became almost worthless, and people had to carry bags of cash to buy basic necessities. The bolivar collapsed so completely that the government had to introduce new currencies multiple times. The US government has issued inflation-indexed bonds called TIPS since 1997 to protect investors from the loss of purchasing power that inflation causes. These bonds adjust their principal value based on changes in the consumer price index, so if inflation goes up, the bond's value goes up with it. It's a quiet acknowledgement that inflation is a permanent feature of the modern economy. The cost of a postage stamp in 1900 was 2 cents, which adjusted for inflation would be about 75 cents today, roughly the same as a current stamp. Some prices have kept pace with inflation, while others have fallen behind or surged ahead. The stamp is a rare example of a price that has stayed in line with the overall cost of living. The term inflation comes from the Latin inflare, meaning to blow into or to puff up. It was originally used to describe the expansion of the money supply, not the rise in prices. People didn't start using it to mean rising prices until the mid-19th century, and it was popularized during the US Civil War. The word itself has its own history of inflation. The quantity theory of money, which explains inflation, was first formalized by the Polish mathematician Nicolaus Copernicus in the 16th century. Copernicus observed that when more money is introduced into an economy, prices rise, and he wrote about this in a treatise on monetary reform. It was one of the earliest explanations of inflation, developed centuries before it became a common economic term. The inflation tax is the revenue that a government raises by creating new money, and it is essentially a tax on everyone who holds cash. When the government prints more money, the value of existing money decreases, and the government effectively takes a portion of everyone's purchasing power. It's called a tax because it works like one, but it doesn't require legislation. The Fisher effect, named after economist Irving Fisher, describes how nominal interest rates adjust to inflation. When inflation goes up, interest rates go up to compensate lenders. The theory states that the real interest rate is the nominal rate minus the expected inflation rate, so lenders demand higher rates when they expect higher inflation. It's a simple mathematical relationship that explains why interest rates rise during inflationary periods. Menu costs are the costs that businesses incur when they have to change their prices, and they get their name from the cost of printing new menus in a restaurant during inflation. Every time a business raises its prices, it incurs costs. Printing new signs, updating catalogs, reprogramming computers, and notifying customers. These small costs add up across the entire economy and make inflation inefficient. Shoe leather costs are the resources wasted when people try to reduce their cash holdings during inflation, because they have to go to the bank more often to avoid holding currency that is losing value. The name comes from the idea that people literally wear out their shoes by making more trips to the bank. These small inefficiencies are a real cost of inflation. The German inflation of 1923 led to the introduction of the Rentenmark, which was backed by land and industrial assets, and it stabilized the currency almost overnight. The new currency replaced the old, worthless mark at a rate of 1 trillion to 1, effectively wiping out the inflation. It was one of the most dramatic currency reforms in history. In the 1970s, the US experienced stagflation, a combination of high inflation and high unemployment that economists thought was impossible. The term was coined by a British politician, and it described a decade of rising prices and rising joblessness that defied the conventional wisdom. It was a period that changed how economists thought about inflation. The core inflation rate excludes food and energy prices because they tend to be volatile and can skew the overall inflation figure. By removing these items, economists can get a clearer picture of underlying price trends. It's a measurement that helps policymakers decide whether inflation is a temporary problem or a persistent one. Hyperinflation typically occurs when a government faces a large deficit and cannot borrow or raise taxes, so it simply prints money to pay its bills. The money supply grows faster than the economy, prices rise, and the government prints even more money to keep up. It's a vicious cycle that has destroyed currencies throughout history. The misery index is the sum of the inflation rate and the unemployment rate, and it was popularized by economist Arthur Okun to measure the overall health of the economy. A high misery index means that both prices and joblessness are high, making people feel economically miserable. It's a simple way to summarize the pain of the economy. In 1980, the US inflation rate reached 14.8%, its highest level since World War II, and the Federal Reserve raised interest rates to nearly 20% to bring it down. The high rates caused a recession and increased unemployment, but they eventually broke the back of inflation. It was a painful but necessary cure. Inflation expectations are self-fulfilling. If people expect prices to rise, they will spend more today, which drives prices up, confirming their expectations. This psychological component makes inflation difficult to control because it depends on what people think will happen. The Federal Reserve spends a lot of time managing expectations to prevent inflation from becoming entrenched. The price revolution of the 16th century saw European prices rise by about 400% over a century due to the massive influx of silver from the Americas. The Spanish imported huge quantities of silver from mines in Peru and Mexico, and it flooded the European economy, driving prices up for decades. It was one of the first recorded periods of sustained inflation. The greenback era of the US Civil War saw the introduction of paper money that could not be redeemed for gold, which led to inflation and the phrase, "not worth a continental." The Continental Congress printed so much paper currency during the Revolutionary War that it became almost worthless, and the phrase, "not worth a continental," has been used ever since. The Confederate dollar was issued by the Confederate States of America, and it became worthless by the end of the Civil War due to hyperinflation. The government printed billions of dollars to finance the war, and the currency collapsed along with the Confederacy. It's a reminder that inflation often accompanies political and economic collapse. During the Great Depression, the U.S. experienced deflation, a sustained decrease in prices that made debts harder to repay because the value of money was increasing. Deflation is the opposite of inflation, and it can be just as damaging because it discourages spending and investment. The Depression was a rare period of falling prices in modern U.S. history. The Taylor Rule is a formula that central banks use to set interest rates based on inflation and economic output, and it was developed by economist John Taylor in the 1990s. The rule provides a guideline for what interest rates should be to achieve stable inflation and full employment. It's a widely used tool in modern monetary policy. The Phillips curve shows the inverse relationship between unemployment and inflation. When unemployment is low, inflation tends to be high, and vice versa. The relationship was observed by economist A.W. Phillips in the 1950s, and it has been a central concept in macroeconomics ever since. It's a trade-off that policymakers have to manage. The natural rate of unemployment is the unemployment rate that exists when the economy is at full potential and it is not affected by inflation. The concept was developed by economists Milton Friedman and Edmund Phelps in the 1960s, and it suggests that there is a limit to how much inflation can reduce unemployment. It's a key concept in understanding the limits of monetary policy. And somewhere in the vaults of the Federal Reserve, a computer is calculating the rate of inflation for the coming month, based on millions of prices collected from stores across the country. The number will be announced, markets will react, and the slow erosion of purchasing power will continue. It's a quiet, relentless process that affects every dollar, every price, and every wallet, all without making a sound. The U.S. Secret Service was created in 1865 specifically to combat counterfeiting. It was not created to protect the president. At the time, up to a third of all paper money circulating in the United States was thought to be fake, a problem so severe it threatened to undermine the entire economy. The agency was placed under the Treasury Department, and presidential protection came later, after the assassination of William McKinley in 1901. In the 1870s, a forger named Samuel Upham sold facsimile Confederate currency as souvenirs in Philadelphia, but cotton traders soon started trimming off the disclaimer line and spending the notes as real money. The South was flooded with counterfeits, and the Confederate Congress brought in the death penalty as punishment for counterfeiting. Upham claimed to have printed $15 million worth of fake notes before the operation ended. The most famous counterfeiter of the late 19th century was known as Jim the Penman, a mysterious artist whose hand-drawn bills were so detailed they fooled bank tellers for decades. His $20 bills were drawn line for line with pen and watercolor, and the New York Times reported that officials believed all these bills were the work of one man. He was never caught, and his identity remains unknown to this day. During World War II, the Nazis produced counterfeit British pound notes in Operation Bernhard, the largest forgery operation in history. Over 9 million fake notes were produced, with a face value of £130 million, worth about $6 billion today. The notes were so good that some historians estimate up to 40% of British notes in circulation after the war were counterfeit. The operation was run by Major Bernhard Kruger, who forced 140 Jewish prisoners at Sachsenhausen concentration camp to produce the forgeries. The plan was to drop the money over London to cause hyperinflation, but the idea was abandoned. Instead, the notes were used to pay agents, buy gold and jewelry, and exchange for other currencies. At the end of the war, the Nazis intentionally sank all remaining equipment and notes in Lake Toplitz, Austria, to destroy the evidence. The prisoners who had worked on the project were taken to Ebensee Camp to be killed, but they were liberated by American forces on May 6, 1945, just days before they were to be executed. The lake has been searched for decades, and divers still occasionally find bundles of notes. A counterfeit $20 bill that appeared in 1879 was so convincing that a New Orleans bank teller examined it under a magnifying glass and still wasn't sure. The bill had the correct portrait of Alexander Hamilton, the correct signatures, and the correct lathwork design, all drawn by hand. It was only later that officials confirmed it was a masterpiece of imitation. The practice of counterfeiting is nearly as old as money itself. Cowrie shells, one of the earliest forms of currency, were imitated using ivory, bone, and clam shells, and later bronze. The first coins were almost immediately counterfeited as well, with Greek coins around 400 BC, often covered with a layer of precious metal over a cheaper core. Coin shaving, or clipping, was another common method of fraud in the 17th century, where the edges of silver coins were gradually shaved off and melted down. By the 1690s, the weight of properly minted British coins had fallen to half the legal standard, and 1 in 10 coins was counterfeit. Sir Isaac Newton, as Warden of the Royal Mint, personally identified the lead counterfeiter, William Challoner, who was hanged for his crimes. The first paper money in China during the Song dynasty had complex designs, special colors, signatures, and stamps on specially made paper to discourage counterfeiters, and those caught faced the death penalty. Despite these measures, counterfeiting increased over time, and the government eventually restricted note issuing to the state. The notes expired after 2 years, in part to ensure they didn't become too worn and easier to copy. In 1807, a notorious counterfeiter named Stephen Burroughs produced counterfeit $1 notes modeled on the Union Bank of Boston, signing them as the cashier. Burroughs was so well known that his memoir painted his exploits as pranks rather than crimes, and in many places he was viewed as a folk hero. He was imprisoned in Massachusetts and escaped 3 times before being pardoned in Canada. The first European paper money in Sweden in 1661 was quickly overissued and counterfeited, leading to inflation and a loss of confidence in the currency. The Swedish experiment with paper money was one of the first in Europe, and it didn't go well. The notes lost value quickly, and the government had to intervene. The superdollar is a high-quality counterfeit $100 bill, reportedly produced by North Korea, so good that it sometimes fools banks. The notes are printed with such precision that even trained experts have trouble distinguishing them from genuine bills. The U.S. government has repeatedly redesigned the $100 bill to stay ahead of these sophisticated counterfeits. The United States redesigned the $100 bill in 1996 with a hologram and other security features, the most significant redesign since 1928. The bill's new security features included a watermark, a security thread, color-shifting ink, and microprinting, all designed to make counterfeiting much harder. The redesign was a direct response to the growing sophistication of counterfeiters. Frank Abagnale, whose story was the basis for the film Catch Me If You Can, forged checks, not currency, though the film sometimes blurs that distinction. Abagnale wrote bad checks worth over $2.5 million across 26 countries, and he posed as an airline pilot, a doctor, and a lawyer. His story is a reminder that document fraud comes in many forms. In 2000, a man tried to pass a fake $1 million bill at a store, but the bill didn't exist as a denomination, making it an obvious forgery. The man was arrested, and the incident was a reminder that counterfeiters sometimes make mistakes that are almost comical. A fake $1 million bill is about as useless as a fake $1 trillion bill. Modern counterfeit detection involves checking the watermark, security thread, color-shifting ink, and microprinting on a note. A genuine $100 bill has a security thread embedded in the paper that glows pink under ultraviolet light, a watermark that appears when held up to light, and microprinting that is too small to copy. These features make modern notes much harder to counterfeit than older designs. The U.S. Bureau of Engraving and Printing catches about 80% of counterfeit notes before they leave the mint through its quality control process. The scrutiny is relentless, and any note that doesn't meet the exact specifications is destroyed immediately. It's a reminder that making money is as much about preventing fraud as it is about producing currency. In the 1820s, a forger in the UK produced fake £5 notes that were so convincing that the Bank of England was forced to redesign the currency. The redesign was one of many that have happened over the centuries as counterfeiters have grown more sophisticated. It's a cycle that continues to this day. In 2012, a Canadian counterfeiter named Frank Bourassa was arrested after producing $250 million in fake U.S. currency, the largest counterfeit operation in North American history. Bourassa, who owned a brake factory in Quebec, made a deal with the Secret Service. He handed over $200 million of the counterfeit cash and provided expert advice in exchange for a short prison sentence. His story is a reminder that even the best counterfeiters can be caught. In the United Kingdom, a counterfeiting gang was convicted in 2021 and 2022 for producing £12 million in fake notes, the largest seizure in British history. The gang's notes were so good that the Bank of England was forced to change the design of the £20 note. The design change was a direct response to the sophistication of the counterfeits. In Italy, France, and Belgium, authorities arrested 44 people in 2020 in connection with a counterfeiting operation involving €233 million. The operation was linked to the Camorra, southern Italy's mafia group, and authorities seized 50 properties, 10 companies, 12 vehicles, and a luxury yacht. It was one of the largest counterfeiting crackdowns in European history. In China, the Ministry of Public Security reported the country's largest currency counterfeiting seizure since 1949, when police seized 422 million yuan in counterfeit notes, worth about $59.5 million. The seizure was a major blow to counterfeiters in the country and highlighted the scale of the problem in the world's most populous nation. The Australian government barred states from issuing banknotes in 1910 and transferred the responsibility to the Commonwealth Treasury. In 1920, the Commonwealth Bank took over note issue entirely. The standardization was an attempt to reduce counterfeiting, which had been rampant under the previous system of multiple issuers. In 1927, a man named Albert Wignall pleaded guilty to possessing 21 forged £5 notes, but claimed he had found them and didn't know they were counterfeit. The judge hearing the case described the relevant law as ridiculous, since anyone who handled the notes in court could be arrested. The judge ruled that one could not be convicted unless one had guilty knowledge, a principle that remains in Australian law today. The current Australian law under the Crimes, Currency Act 1981 states that it is an offence to possess counterfeit money, knowing it to be counterfeit money, but the law does not apply if the person has a reasonable excuse. This rule allows people who accidentally come into possession of fake money to surrender it without facing criminal charges. It's a practical measure that prevents innocent people from being punished. The law in many countries requires that counterfeit notes be surrendered to authorities. In some places, holding on to them without a reasonable excuse is itself a crime. In Australia, the law explicitly states that anyone who comes into possession of counterfeit money has a reasonable excuse if they promptly surrender it to police. It's a law that recognizes that even honest people can accidentally end up with fake money. In many states in the U.S., counterfeiting currency is a felony, and the severity of the punishment depends on the amount involved. In Kansas, for example, counterfeiting currency is a severity level 7 felony if the face value is $25,000 or more, and a level 8 felony if it's less. This tiered approach allows judges to impose punishments that fit the scale of the crime. The Bermuda Criminal Code makes it an offense to make, pass, or possess counterfeit currency with intent to defraud, and it also prohibits making or possessing implements specifically designed for counterfeiting. The law includes a defense for those with lawful authority or excuse, which allows for legitimate reproduction of currency for educational or artistic purposes. It's a balanced approach to a serious crime. Counterfeiting has been used as a political weapon by governments throughout history. Britain counterfeited American currency during the Revolutionary War, and Napoleon counterfeited Russian and Austrian notes. Japan counterfeited Chinese currency in the late 1930s, only to find that by the time they were ready to print the 10 yuan note, it had devalued to the point of worthlessness. It's a reminder that counterfeit money can be used as a tool of war. Today, the battle between counterfeiters and currency designers continues, with each new security feature met by new techniques to defeat it. The $100 bill has been redesigned multiple times, and the Bureau of Engraving and Printing continues to develop new features to stay ahead of counterfeiters. It's a quiet war that never ends. The U.S. Bureau of Engraving and Printing is the quiet factory where paper money is born, and it operates in just 2 facilities, one in Washington, D.C., and one in Fort Worth, Texas. These are the only places in the United States where banknotes are produced, and they work around the clock. The buildings are surprisingly ordinary on the outside, but inside they are filled with precision machinery and careful hands. Visitors to the Bureau in Washington can watch the printing process from a glass gallery, looking down on the enormous presses that roll out sheets of currency. The sheets are massive, each one holding dozens of notes, and they move through the presses with a steady, rhythmic hum. It is a quiet, almost hypnotic process that few people ever get to see. The U.S. Mint, which produces coins rather than paper money, has facilities in Denver, Philadelphia, San Francisco, and West Point, plus the bullion depository at Fort Knox. Each mint has its own mint mark, a small letter stamped onto the coin that indicates where it was made. The marks are tiny, barely visible to the naked eye, but they carry the history of the coin's origin. The Royal Mint in the UK was established in the year 886 AD, making it the oldest mint in the world that is still operating. It has been producing coins for well over 1,000 years, and it has survived wars, plagues, and the rise and fall of empires. The mint now operates in a modern facility in Llantrisant, Wales, but its roots go back to the time of Alfred the Great. The Philadelphia Mint is the largest mint in the world, producing about 25% of all U.S. coins each year. The building is massive, and its machinery is constantly running, turning out millions of coins every single day. It has been operating since 1792, and it has outlasted every other mint in the country. The West Point Mint produces bullion coins and is known for its W Mint mark, and it is the most secure mint in the United States. The facility is located on the grounds of the U.S. Military Academy, and it is heavily guarded. It is not open to the public, and its operations are shrouded in a quiet secrecy. The Canadian Mint in Winnipeg produces coins for over 70 countries, making it one of the most widely used mints in the world. It produces coins for countries ranging from Australia to the Philippines, and it is known for its high quality and precision. The Mint in Winnipeg is a global hub for coin production. A banknote is printed using a series of steps: engraving, printing the background, printing the portrait, and applying the security features. Each step is carefully controlled, and the notes are inspected at every stage to ensure they meet the exacting standards. The process is slow and methodical, designed to produce notes that are both beautiful and difficult to counterfeit. The ink used in printing currency is specially formulated to be resistant to fading and wear, and it can last for decades without losing its color. The ink is a carefully guarded formula, designed to withstand the rigors of circulation. It is part of what gives U.S. currency its distinctive appearance and longevity. The U.S. Bureau of Engraving and Printing produces about 38 million notes per day, with a total value of about $1.2 billion. That is an extraordinary amount of money, flowing out of the printing presses every single day. It is a reminder of the scale of the American economy and the constant demand for new currency. The engraving plates for U.S. currency are made from steel and are meticulously hand-engraved by a team of skilled artists. The process is incredibly detailed, with each line and curve carefully cut into the metal. It is a dying art, but one that remains essential to the production of secure currency. In 2003, the U.S. Mint produced 28.2 billion coins, the largest production year in its history. That is an almost unimaginable number of coins, each one a tiny piece of metal that would eventually find its way into a pocket or a jar. The mint that year was operating at full capacity around the clock. The Perth Mint in Australia produces about half of the world's gold bullion coins, and it is one of the largest refineries in the world. The mint has been operating since 1899, and it has processed billions of dollars worth of gold over its history. It is a quiet giant of the precious metals industry. The Bank of England's printing works is in Debden, Essex, and it produces the vast majority of the UK's banknotes. The facility is highly secure, and it employs hundreds of people who operate the massive printing presses. It is one of the most efficient currency printing operations in the world. The De La Rue Printing Company is one of the largest commercial security printers in the world, producing currency for over 150 countries. The company has been in operation since the 19th century, and it has printed everything from dollar bills to passport pages. It is a quiet powerhouse of the global currency industry. The Federal Reserve orders new currency each year, based on projected demand, and in 2022, it ordered about 6.3 billion notes. That is an enormous number of bills, each one carefully counted and shipped to banks across the country. The Federal Reserve is the silent conductor of this vast orchestration of printing and distribution. Long before metal coins and paper bills, people used whatever was available, durable, and difficult to find as a medium of exchange. The cowrie shell was arguably the most successful form of money in human history, used across Africa, Asia, and Oceania for thousands of years. The small sea snail shell, scientifically named Monetaria moneta, was collected by the millions in the Maldives and traded all the way to China and West Africa. It was durable, lightweight, easy to transport, and almost impossible to counterfeit. The cowrie shell's shape and appearance made it naturally suitable for use as currency. It could be poured, sacked, shoveled, hoarded in heaps, kept buried in the soil, and chuted like gravel, yet it remained clean, dainty, stainless, polished, and milk-white. These physical attributes allowed cowries to circulate for decades without discernible change in form or value. The shell even gave its name to the first metal coins, with cowrie-like shapes appearing on the earliest Chinese and Mediterranean currency. Salt was used as currency in many parts of the world, and the word salary itself comes from the Latin salarium and the allowance given to Roman soldiers specifically for buying salt. In Ethiopia, salt blocks called amole were used as currency for centuries, and they were a standard form of payment across much of East Africa. The salt was compressed into blocks that could be broken into smaller pieces, making it a flexible and practical currency. Tea bricks were used as currency in China, Mongolia, Siberia, Tibet, Turkmenistan, and Russia for over 1,000 years. During the Song dynasty in China, which lasted from 960 to 1279, compressed tea bricks were even used to pay taxes. The bricks were made by pressing tea leaves into solid blocks that could be transported easily, and they had the advantage of being both a useful commodity and a store of value. Wampum, shell beads woven together into strings or belts, were used as money by Native American tribes in the northeastern United States and eastern Canada. The beads were made from the shells of the quahog clam and the whelk, and they were highly valued for their beauty and durability. Wampum was also used to record important treaties and historical events, serving both as currency and as a form of written record. Large stone discs called rye stones were used as currency in the Yap Islands of Micronesia, and some of them were enormous, up to 12 feet in diameter and weighing 4 tons. The stones were carved from limestone quarried on the island of Palau, hundreds of miles away from Yap, and transported by canoe and raft. The largest stones probably required hundreds of men to carry, and they were rarely moved once they were in place. The ownership of a rice stone was established not by its physical location but by its history, which was recorded in oral tradition. Even if the stone was too heavy to move, its ownership could change simply by appending a new name to its oral history. In one famous case, a large rice stone being transported by canoe was accidentally dropped and sank to the seafloor, but it continued to be transacted as if it were still visible, because everyone agreed it was still there. Cacao beans were used as currency by the Aztecs and other Mesoamerican cultures, and they were valuable for both their use as a food and their role in trade. The beans were small, portable, and difficult to counterfeit, and they were used to pay for everything from food to tribute. A standardized copper currency called the tajadero, or Aztec hoe money, was also used in central Mexico and had a fixed worth of 8,000 cacao seeds. Rice was used as currency in parts of Asia and the American colonies, and it was standardized into units of weight for easy trade. The grain was a staple food, and its value was widely recognized, making it a practical form of money. Rice could be stored for long periods, and it was easy to measure and divide into smaller amounts. Feathers from certain birds were used as currency in parts of Africa and Oceania, and they were valued for their rarity and beauty. In the Solomon Islands, bat teeth and dolphin teeth were used as money, and in some parts of Fiji and Papua New Guinea, the use of mammal teeth as a store of value was quite common. Teeth were durable, distinctive, and difficult to counterfeit. Squirrel pelts were used as currency in some parts of North America, where furs were valuable and widely traded. In medieval England, sheep were sometimes used as currency, and a sheep could be traded for goods. Livestock was a store of value and a form of payment in many societies, and the word pecuniary itself comes from the Latin for cattle. Hair from certain animals was used as currency in some Pacific islands, where it was woven into belts or ropes. Leather currency was used in some parts of Europe during the Middle Ages. It was stamped with a value and could be exchanged for goods. Cheese was used as currency in some parts of Europe, where it was valued for its shelf life and portability. Barter tokens, made from clay, wood, or metal, were used in many early economies as a stand-in for goods. The tokens were often shaped like the items they represented, and they were a way of keeping track of exchanges without carrying the actual goods. They were an early form of representative money, a step toward the coins and bills we use today. The use of shells as money has been documented for at least 3,000 years, and the practice continued in many parts of Africa well into the 19th century. The cowrie shell was so successful as a currency that it was used in China as early as 1200 BCE. It was the most widely used currency in the world for a very long time. The production of cowrie shells for currency was a major industry in the Maldives, and the shells were transported by Arab traders across the Indian Ocean for nearly 700 years. At the end of the 16th century, cowries were an important sign of wealth in many West African kingdoms, and the basis of the slave trade. The shells facilitated vast networks of commerce. The money cowrie is still recognized in its scientific name, monetaria, moneta, which directly points to its acknowledged use as a form of money. The connection between the shell and money is so old and so deep that the shell became synonymous with currency itself. Even today, the word for money in some languages is derived from the word for cowrie. Wampum's value in the Northeast was based not only on its beauty but also on the labor required to produce it. Each bead had to be carefully drilled and polished. The high labor cost, together with natural scarcity in the interior regions, worked to maintain the value of shell money. It was a system that kept the currency stable for centuries. The value of wampum was eventually undermined when coastal European groups intensified production at the end of the 18th century, causing runaway inflation and the collapse of its value. The shells had been carefully regulated by indigenous groups, but the sudden influx of European-made beads destroyed the currency. It was an early example of inflation caused by overproduction. Rye stones are still exchanged in traditional ways on Yap, even though Western-style money has replaced them for everyday transactions. They are a national symbol and are even depicted on local license plates. One rye stone, 7 feet in diameter, is exhibited in the garden of the lobby of the Bank of Canada in Ottawa. The trade for rye stones eventually stopped at the beginning of the 20th century due to trade disputes between Spanish and German interests in the area, and the quarries were abandoned. When Japanese forces took over Yap during World War II, they used some of the stones for construction or as anchors. The stones that remain are monuments to a unique form of currency. In California, the Chumash people used olivella shell beads as money, and they were used for market-like exchanges and to pay debts. The beads were standardized in production and were highly valued in the interior regions, where coastal shells were scarce. They were a functional currency that continued to be used well into the early 20th century. The unique shape and source area of the cowrie shell made it hard to counterfeit or substitute. Unlike many other forms of shell money, cowries were often used in an unmodified form. They didn't need to be drilled or shaped. Their natural shape was already perfect for handling and counting. Cowrie shells were collected in their millions in the Maldives and traded from the Indian Ocean to all corners of Eurasia and Africa. The small sea snail subsisted mainly on algae in shallow waters and reefs, and its shell was naturally quite durable, lightweight, and easy to transport. It was a currency that came from the sea. In the 15th century, after the voyages of Zheng He, the Ming government in China converted silk and cloth payments into pepper and sappanwood payments, effectively creating a fragrant currency system. Spices became a form of money, and the smell of money was literally the smell of spices. It was a brief but memorable chapter in the history of unusual currencies. The first European paper money in Sweden in 1661 was quickly overissued and counterfeited, leading to inflation and a loss of confidence in the currency. But before that and long after, people have used whatever was available, shells, salt, stones, and even cheese, to pay for things. It is a reminder that money is ultimately just a story we all agree to believe. The US $1 bill features a portrait of George Washington, and it has remained essentially unchanged in design since 1963, making it one of the most recognizable pieces of paper in the world. The portrait is based on a painting by Gilbert Stuart, which was never finished, but it has become the definitive image of the first president. It's a face that almost every American has seen thousands of times. The $20 bill features Andrew Jackson, though there have been ongoing proposals to replace him with Harriet Tubman, a change that has been discussed for over a decade. Jackson was a controversial figure, and the move to replace him has been driven by a desire to honor a woman who escaped slavery and became a leader in the abolitionist movement. The redesign has been delayed multiple times, but the proposal remains active. The $5 bill features Abraham Lincoln, and it was redesigned in 2008 with a new portrait and the addition of color-shifting ink, making it harder to counterfeit. The new design includes a purple background and a watermark of Lincoln's face, adding layers of security to the familiar image. It's a quiet update to a bill that has been in circulation for over a century. The $10 bill features Alexander Hamilton, the first Treasury Secretary and the only non-president on U.S. paper currency who was not a president. Hamilton's portrait has been on the $10 bill since 1928, and his face is one of the most recognized on American money. His story as a founding father and architect of the financial system makes him a fitting choice for the denomination. The $50 bill features Ulysses S. Grant, and it was redesigned in 2004 with purple and blue color elements, making it one of the more colorful U.S. notes. The redesign was part of a broader effort to modernize the currency and make it more difficult to counterfeit. The purple and blue hues are a departure from the traditional green and black of older bills. The $100 bill features Benjamin Franklin, the only non-president on U.S. currency, who was not a Treasury Secretary, and it is one of the most widely held denominations outside the United States. The bill was redesigned in 2013 with a blue security ribbon and a watermark of Franklin's face, adding layers of protection against counterfeiting. It's a bill that is as much a symbol of American wealth as it is a piece of paper. The Euro banknotes feature bridges, gates, and architectural elements that were intentionally designed to be symbolically neutral, representing the unity of Europe without favoring any particular country. The designs were chosen to represent the common cultural heritage of Europe, with each denomination featuring a different architectural style. It's a subtle way of representing diversity without division. The Canadian $20 bill features the Canadian Rockies, and the $50 bill features the Arctic, both showcasing the natural beauty of Canada's vast landscape. The images are drawn from photographs and are designed to be both beautiful and recognizable. They are a celebration of the country's geography. The Australian $5 bill features Queen Elizabeth II, though her portrait has been updated several times over the years to reflect her changing appearance. The portrait is based on photographs commissioned by the Reserve Bank, and it has been a constant feature of Australian currency since the 1960s. The design has evolved, but the face remains the same. The Swiss franc features portraits of Swiss cultural figures. The 100-franc note has the sculptor Alberto Giacometti, one of the most famous Swiss artists of the 20th century. The notes are widely regarded as some of the most beautiful in the world, with a clean, modern design that reflects Swiss precision. The design is a combination of art and functionality. Many banknotes feature microprinting, text so small it cannot be read without magnification, as a key security feature. The text is often invisible to the naked eye, but it can be read under a magnifying glass, and it is one of the most effective ways to deter counterfeiting. It's a quiet detail that only becomes visible when you look closely. The design of U.S. currency is the work of the Bureau of Engraving and Printing's design team, and all U.S. notes are hand-engraved, a process that has remained largely unchanged for over a century. The engravers are highly skilled artists who spend years learning their craft, and their work is a combination of art and precision. It's a tradition that has survived the digital age. The portrait on U.S. currency must be of a deceased person. No living person can appear on U.S. paper money, a rule that has been in place since the 19th century. This rule prevents living politicians from appearing on currency, which was a concern in the early days of the Republic. It's a tradition that keeps money free from political self-promotion. The choice of portraits on U.S. currency is not random. Each person was selected for their contribution to American history, and the decisions were often political. The faces on the bills are a quiet record of who the country has chosen to honor over the centuries. It's a history written in ink and cotton. Banknote design is a combination of art and science, with designers balancing aesthetics, security, and durability in every note. The colors, patterns, and images are all chosen to be both beautiful and functional, and they are tested extensively before they go into circulation. It's a process that takes years and involves hundreds of people. The design of a banknote often reflects the values of the country that issues it. The choice of images, colors, and symbols is a deliberate statement of national identity. A banknote is a miniaturized portrait of the country it represents, a piece of propaganda that is also a piece of art. It carries the weight of the nation's self-image. Many countries include images of their natural environment on their banknotes, featuring wildlife, landscapes, and native plants as symbols of their national heritage. Australia's notes feature native birds and wattle. Canada's feature mountains and Arctic scenes. New Zealand's feature native birds like the kiwi. It's a way of saying this is who we are. The Canadian loonie and toonie are examples of how coins can become symbols of national identity, with the loon and polar bear representing the country's wildlife. The loon is a common sight on Canadian lakes, and the polar bear is a symbol of the Canadian Arctic. They are coins that tell a story of the land. The use of color in banknote design is carefully considered. Each denomination has a distinct color to help people distinguish between them quickly and easily. The colors are standardized and consistent, making it easy to tell a 20 from a 50 even in poor lighting. It's a simple design choice that has a huge impact on usability. Microprinting and security threads are not just functional, they are also artistic elements that add texture and complexity to the design. The security features are often integrated into the design in ways that enhance the overall appearance of the note, making it both secure and beautiful. It's a marriage of form and function. The decision to include a specific person on a banknote is often the result of years of debate, with politicians, historians, and the public weighing in on who deserves the honor. The faces on currency are a reflection of the values of the society that issues them, and the debates over who should appear reveal a lot about a country's priorities. It's a conversation that never really ends. In 2020, the U.S. Treasury Department announced that Harriet Tubman would appear on the $20 bill, but the redesign has been delayed multiple times, and it remains uncertain when it will happen. The decision was one of the most significant changes to U.S. currency in decades, and it sparked a national conversation about race, history, and representation. The bill remains a work in progress. The Bank of England introduced a new polymer £20 note in 2020, featuring the artist J.M.W. Turner, one of the most famous British painters. The note includes a quote from Turner's poetry and a miniature version of his painting, The Fighting Téméraire, making it a work of art in itself. It's a note that celebrates creativity and culture. The new generation of Australian banknotes features a tactile feature, raised bumps along the edges of the note, to help the vision impaired distinguish between denominations. The bumps are a simple but effective design element, and they are one of the most inclusive features of modern currency. It's a design choice that makes money more accessible. The use of holograms and color-shifting ink on modern banknotes is a direct response to the increasing sophistication of counterfeiters, but these features are also visually striking. When you tilt a new bill, the colors shift, and the images move, making the note feel alive. It's a combination of security and beauty. The design of banknotes is a highly secretive process. The artists and designers who work on currency are often bound by non-disclosure agreements, and the designs are kept under wraps until they are ready to be announced. The secrecy is necessary to prevent counterfeiting, but it also adds an air of mystery to the process. The public never sees the hundreds of rejected designs. The Tree of Life sample banknotes from Kurds are examples of how security features can be integrated into a design in a functional and visually appealing way, combining art and technology. The notes are not actual currency, but they demonstrate what is possible when designers push the boundaries. They are a glimpse into the future of banknote design. The winner of the International Banknote Society's Banknote of the Year Award for 2025 was the 200 gulden from Curaçao and Sint Maarten, which features an underwater world theme with seahorses and a giant tun shell. The note is a stunning example of how art and security can coexist, with a horizontal face and a vertical back. It's a miniature piece of marine art. The inclusion of animals on banknotes is a common design choice, with Australia featuring a laughing kookaburra on its $20 note, and a sulfur-crested cockatoo on its $10 note. The birds are native to the country, and they add a touch of life to the notes. It's a way of bringing a little bit of the wild into everyday transactions. The design of a banknote is a reflection of a country's identity, and the choices that designers make reveal a lot about what that country values. Whether it's a portrait of a national hero, a scene of the natural landscape, or a symbol of cultural heritage, every design choice carries meaning. A banknote is a story, and that story changes with every new series. The first U.S. coin to officially leave Earth's atmosphere was the Sacagawea golden dollar, which made the journey aboard the Space Shuttle Columbia in 1999 as part of the STS-93 mission. A total of 20 of these 22-karat gold coins traveled nearly 2 million miles in orbit, and they later sold at auction for a combined $3.28 million. The mission was the first to be commanded by a woman, and the coins became the most valuable space-flown federal coins ever sold. The Sacagawea coins were not the first coins in space, though. The Soviet Union sent a 1965 ruble into orbit with cosmonaut Alexei Leonov, making it one of the earliest pieces of currency to leave the planet. The ruble was never spent, but it traveled as a small piece of home for the cosmonaut who was making history with the first spacewalk. It was a quiet companion on a journey into the unknown. In 2007, a foreign exchange company called Travelex unveiled a proposed currency for space tourists, which they dubbed the Quasi-Universal Intergalactic Denomination, or QUID for short. The coins were designed to be oval and made of Teflon, the same material used on non-stick pans, so they would have no sharp edges that could puncture a spacesuit. Each coin featured a picture of the solar system and a unique code number to prevent counterfeiting. The QUID was actually a viral marketing campaign, but it was developed with input from the National Space Center and the University of Leicester. The designers noted that credit cards and magnetic strips would be damaged by cosmic radiation, and that any money used in space would need to be chemically inert and smooth. The coins were eventually displayed at the National Space Center. No currency has ever been officially used as payment in space. All transactions are still handled on Earth. Astronauts are government employees on missions, and they don't need to buy anything while they are in orbit. But the idea of space money has captured the imagination of designers and marketers alike. The cost of sending a coin into space is substantial. Based on current launch costs of roughly $10,000 per kilogram, a single penny would cost about $4,000 to launch. That makes space-flown coins some of the most expensive pieces of currency ever created, at least in terms of transportation costs. The value comes not from the coin itself, but from the journey it has taken. In 2012, a Canadian astronaut carried a $1 coin, a loonie, to the International Space Station, and it was later returned to Earth. The coin had become a small piece of Canadiana in orbit, and it was a symbol of the country's contribution to space exploration. It was a quiet reminder of home, floating in the vastness of space. The U.S. Mint has produced commemorative coins honoring NASA missions, including the Apollo 11 50th anniversary commemorative coins, two of which were aboard the International Space Station in 2019. Astronaut Christina Koch sent a message from the space station before the coins returned to Earth. The coins were both a tribute and a tangible connection to the history of space exploration. The Maryland and Florida state quarters are aboard NASA's New Horizons spacecraft, which launched in 2006 and flew past Ultima Thule in the Kuiper Belt in 2019. The two quarters serve as spin balance weights on the spacecraft, and they have traveled farther than any other coins in history. They have become the most distant pieces of currency ever minted. The coins on New Horizons are a quiet tribute to the states that designed and launched the spacecraft. They are not there as money, but as symbols of the human effort that went into the mission. They will continue to drift through the Kuiper Belt, far beyond the reach of any bank. The first coin in space was a 1965 Russian ruble, carried by cosmonaut Alexei Leonov, and it was never spent. It was a small piece of metal that had traveled into the unknown, a symbol of the Soviet space program. It was a quiet artifact of a time when space was a new frontier. The largest coin ever taken to space was a 5-kilogram gold coin from Austria, which was carried on a space tourism flight in 2006. The coin was a massive piece of precious metal, and it was taken to space as a promotional stunt. It was a reminder that money can be a symbol as well as a medium of exchange. In 2025, the U.S. Mint acknowledged that many coins have traveled into space over the years, from the Sacagawea dollar to the state quarters on New Horizons. The Mint noted that coins from the United States have journeyed across the galaxy, witnessing historic moments in space exploration. It's a quiet record of the intersection between currency and the cosmos. There is a story about a large stone disk used as currency on the island of Yap, which was being transported by canoe and accidentally sank to the sea floor. The stone continued to be used as money, even though it was at the bottom of the ocean, because everyone agreed it was still there. If we ever develop a currency for space, it will face the same challenge. Money is ultimately a story we all agree to believe. A 1970s NASA study considered the economics of lunar mining, but concluded that a lunar currency was impractical. The idea of a space currency has been proposed in science fiction since the 1950s, but it has never been developed. The economics of space are simply too uncertain for a stable currency. The United States government has considered the idea of a space dollar for future space colonies, but it has never been developed. The concept remains speculative, a footnote in the history of currency. It is a reminder that the future of money is as uncertain as the future of space exploration. The price of sending a penny into space is about $4,000, based on current launch costs, making it one of the most expensive ways to transport currency. A penny that has been to space is worth far more than its face value, not because of the metal, but because of the journey. The value is in the story. A SpaceX sterling silver coin was carried to the International Space Station as part of the Missile 9 mission in 2018, one of only 50 such coins. The coin traveled over 176 million miles, logged approximately 6,704 orbits, and spent over 14 months in space before returning to Earth. It was a small piece of silver that had seen more of the universe than most people ever will. The coin was part of an experiment called Materials International Space Station Experiment 9, which tested how materials behave in the harsh environment of space. The coin was a scientific payload as well as a collectible, a reminder that even money can be part of research. It was a quiet intersection of commerce and science. Medallions containing flown material from various NASA missions, from Apollo through the Space Shuttle and the ISS, have been produced by private companies. These medallions are embedded with small pieces of spacecraft that have actually traveled in space, and they are sold to collectors. They are a tangible connection to the history of exploration. The medallions are often certified with detailed certificates of authenticity, and they are highly prized by collectors of space memorabilia. They are not currency, but they are a form of value, a store of history rather than a store of wealth. They are a quiet reminder that money can take many forms. NASA astronauts are paid a civilian government salary, and they don't receive overtime or hazard pay for their time in space. In 2026, the Artemis II astronauts who looped around the far side of the moon earned about $152,000 a year, with no performance bonus or additional compensation for their historic journey. They also receive a small daily stipend of about $5 for incidentals. The compensation for astronauts is strikingly ordinary, closer to a mid-career desk job than a once-in-a-generation journey around the moon. The pay is a matter of civil service grade, rather than the value of the mission. It's a quiet reminder that space exploration is still a government enterprise. When 2 NASA astronauts were stranded in space for more than 9 months in 2024-25, they only received $5 per extra day in space, totaling about $1,430 each. That's less than the cost of a plane ticket back to Earth. The extra time in space was not compensated as overtime. NASA's class of 2025 selected just 10 candidates from more than 8,000 applicants, an acceptance rate of roughly 0.125%. That's far more selective than Harvard or Stanford, yet the pay is comparable to a skilled trade. The value of the work is measured in prestige, not dollars. Canada's first female astronaut, Roberta Bondar, was paid as a university professor while she was in space, receiving an annual salary of about $66,000 in 1992. The astronauts of Artemis II will return to Earth with the same salary they had before they left, because the work is still government work. The compensation for astronauts is a strange calculation, a high risk, a high level of training, and a competitive selection process, but a salary that is not exceptional by government standards. The value of the work is not in the salary, but in the experience. It's a career that pays in accomplishment rather than cash. And somewhere, on a spacecraft drifting through the Kuiper Belt, a Maryland state quarter and a Florida state quarter are spinning slowly, acting as balance weights for a mission that has traveled farther than any other spacecraft. The coins have no value in space. No one will ever spend them. They are just small pieces of Earth carried into the cosmos, a reminder that money is ultimately a human invention that only matters on the planet where we live. Bucks, as a slang term for dollars, has a fascinating and somewhat debated origin, but the most common explanation points to the North American deer trade. European settlers and Native Americans often traded buckskins, or deerskins, as a form of currency, and each skin was known as a buck. This usage appears as early as 1748, when a Pennsylvania pioneer named Conrad Weiser recorded a transaction for a cask of whiskey as $5. The term survived long after deerskins stopped being used as money. There is another theory, though, which suggests that buck is a shortened form of sawbuck, a slang term for a $10 bill. This name supposedly comes from the Roman numeral X on early $10 bills, which resembles a sawbuck, a frame used for holding wood to be cut. The origin of the term is still debated, and it may have developed from multiple sources over time. The word stuck, however, and buck remains one of the most common American terms for a dollar. Quid, the British slang term for a pound, likely comes from the Latin phrase quid pro quo, meaning something for something. The connection is that money is used in exchange, a quid pro quo, and the term quid itself came to mean the pound sterling. The word has been British slang since the 1680s, and it is still widely used today. Dough, as a term for money, is an American invention from the mid-1800s. It first appeared in print in the Yale Tomahawk magazine in 1851, where a writer joked about needing sufficient dough. It came from the sense that money, like bread, is a basic necessity, something you need to survive, and it predates the slang use of bread. It's a simple term, but it has a long history in American slang. Cheddar, as a term for money, is a little more recent and is likely an extension of the slang word cheese. The idea is that cheese is a commodity that can be traded, and cheddar is a specific type of cheese, making it a fun and slightly silly variation. It became popular in the 1990s and has become a common slang term in popular culture. Moolah is a slang term for money with an uncertain origin. Many origins have been suggested, from the Romani word for valuable to a translation of heap of gold from Irish, but none have been confirmed by linguists. The first known use in print was in 1936, and it may have come from a vaudeville act, where one performer used moolah as his idea of pidgin English. Its origin remains a mystery, but it has persisted for decades. Bread, as a slang term for money, is thought to date back to the 1930s in America. It's a natural extension of the idea that bread is a staple, and dough already meant money, so bread was a logical next step. There is also the Cockney rhyming slang bread and honey, which means money. It's a term that has remained popular for almost a century. Clams, as a term for dollars, may come from the use of clam shells as money by Native American tribes on the East Coast. These shells, or wampum, were used as currency, and the name for the shell became a name for money in general. The term has been used in the U.S. since the 19th century, a time when actual clamshells were still remembered as a form of trade. Smackers, as a term for dollars, is thought to come from the sound of coins being placed on a table. It's a word that sounds like what it describes, a bit of onomatopoeia that has been a part of financial slang for a long time. It's a small, quiet term for something that can be very loud. Grand, as a term for $1,000, comes from the idea of grand as in large or important. It's a simple, straightforward way to say a large number without having to say all the zeros, and it has been used since at least the late 19th century. It's a standard term for a significant sum. Benjamins, as a term for $100 bills, comes from the portrait of Benjamin Franklin on the note. He is one of the few non-presidents on U.S. currency, and his face is instantly recognizable. The term was popularized in hip-hop music in the 1990s, adding a more recent cultural layer to the slang. Greenbacks as a term for U.S. currency comes from the green ink used on the backs of bills, a term that dates back to the Civil War. The demand notes issued by the Treasury in 1861 were known as greenbacks because of their green color, and the name stuck. It's a simple, descriptive term for paper money. Dead presidents as a slang term for U.S. currency is a bit grim, but it's accurate, as all the people on U.S. currency are deceased. The term became popular in the 1980s and was famously the title of a 1996 Jay-Z song. It is a reminder that money carries the faces of the dead. Scratch as a slang term for money may come from the idea of scratching out a living, or from the sound of a pen scratching a check. It's a rough, working-class term that suggests money earned through hard work, and it's been around for a long time. It's not a fancy term, but it gets the job done. Geld is a Yiddish term for money that has entered American English, particularly in the context of Hanukkah geld, small coins given as gifts. The word has a soft, warm sound, and it's often used affectionately. It's one of many loanwords that have enriched the language of money. Wonga is a British slang term for money of uncertain origin that has been in use since the 1980s. It may come from Romany or from a brand name, but no one is quite sure. It's a cheerful, slightly silly word that sounds like it should have a clear history, but it doesn't. Dosh is another British slang term for money, a short, punchy word that has been around for decades. It may be derived from the word dos, meaning a bed or a nap, or from an older term for a small coin. It's the kind of term that sounds like it's always been there, casually used in everyday conversation. Lolly is British slang for money, probably derived from the word lollipop, though no one is entirely sure why. It's a sweet, playful term that suggests money as something small and pleasant. It's not a serious term, but it has its place in the casual language of finance. Rhinoceros was once slang for money in the 18th century, and the connection is unclear, but it's a wonderfully odd term. It may have come from the high value of rhino horn, or from a pun on the word rhino, meaning something valuable. It's a term that has long since fallen out of use, a reminder of how creative language can be. Beans as a term for money appears in American slang, and it may come from the use of beans as a form of payment in early colonial times. Beans were a staple crop. They could be stored and traded, and they had value. The term persisted even after coins and paper took over, a quiet connection to a simpler time. Chicken feed as a term for a very small amount of money comes from the idea of feeding chickens with cheap grain. It's a humble term, suggesting money that is barely worth counting, the opposite of big bucks. It's a phrase that has been in use for over a century. The creation of slang terms for money is a constant, evolving process, and new words are invented all the time. Every generation, every culture, every subculture develops its own way of talking about money. It is a secret language, shared among those who use it. These terms are more than just words. They are a window into how people think about money. Some terms are respectful, some are dismissive, some are funny, and some are grim. They reflect the complex relationship that people have with wealth, a relationship that is as old as currency itself. And somewhere, in a conversation between two people, a new slang term for money is being born. It might be a joke, a misunderstanding, or a clever invention, but it will stick, and it will spread, and eventually it will become a part of the language. The secret language of money is always growing, always changing, always being quietly renewed. The British halfpenny was discontinued in 1984, and it had been in use since the 13th century, a quiet end to a coin that had been part of everyday life for over 700 years. It was the smallest denomination in the British system, and its loss was more about practicality than nostalgia. The halfpenny no longer had any real purchasing power. The US half-cent coin was discontinued in 1857, and it was worth the equivalent of about 18 cents today, a small amount even for the time. The coin was made of copper and was often used to pay taxes and small debts. Its production was halted because it simply cost more to make than it was worth. The Canadian penny was discontinued in 2013, though it remains legal tender, and it is no longer produced. The penny had been a staple of Canadian currency for over a century, but its production cost exceeded its face value. It is a coin that is still accepted, but it is slowly fading from everyday use. The German mark was replaced by the euro in 2002, ending a currency that had been in use since 1948. The mark was a symbol of post-war recovery and economic stability, and it was one of the most trusted currencies in the world. Its replacement by the euro was a major step in European integration. The French franc was replaced by the euro in 2002, and it had been in use since 1795. The franc had survived revolutions, wars, and economic upheavals, but it was ultimately replaced by a single European currency. It was a quiet end to a coin that had been part of French life for centuries. The Italian lira was replaced by the euro in 2002, and it had been in use since 1861. The lira was a symbol of Italian unification, and it had survived 2 world wars. Its replacement by the euro marked the end of a national currency that had been part of Italian identity. The Spanish peseta was replaced by the euro in 2002, and it had been in use since 1868. The peseta had seen the Spanish Empire rise and fall, and it had been a constant through centuries of change. Its replacement by the euro was the end of an era. The Greek drachma was replaced by the euro in 2001, and it had been in use since 1832. The drachma was one of the oldest currencies in the world, with roots in ancient Greece. Its replacement by the euro was the end of a lineage that stretched back to antiquity. The US $1,000 bill was discontinued in 1969, and it was the largest denomination in circulation at the time. It featured a portrait of Grover Cleveland, and it was used primarily for bank-to-bank transfers. The bill is still legal tender, but it is rarely seen. The US $500 bill was discontinued in 1969, and it featured William McKinley. The $500 bill was used for large transactions, and its disappearance reflected the declining use of cash for significant payments. It remains a collector's item. The US $5,000 bill was discontinued in 1969, and it featured James Madison. The note was used primarily for large bank transactions and was rarely seen by the public. It is now a rare collectible. The US $10,000 bill was discontinued in 1969, and it featured Salmon P. Chase, the Treasury Secretary under Lincoln. The bill was the largest denomination ever circulated, and its discontinuation marked the end of an era in US currency. It was a quiet farewell to a bill that few people had ever seen. The U.S. Bureau of Engraving and Printing is responsible for designing and printing all U.S. currency, and the decision to discontinue certain denominations is made by the Treasury Department. The 1969 discontinuation of the large bills was a response to the rise of electronic banking and the decline in cash use. It was a practical decision, not a sentimental one. The discontinuation of a currency is a rare event, and it often reflects changes in the economy or society. The disappearance of a coin or a bill is a quiet marker of change, a moment that is recorded in financial history but often goes unnoticed in the daily hum of life. It is a reminder that money is not eternal. The foreign exchange market is the largest financial market in the world, with average daily trading volume reaching $9.5 trillion in April 2025. A 27% increase from just 3 years earlier. That means more money changes hands in a single day on the currency markets than most countries produce in an entire year. The market never sleeps, operating 24 hours a day, 5 days a week, as trading moves from Tokyo to London to New York. To put that $9.5 trillion in perspective, global foreign exchange trading volume in 2025 was roughly 30 times the size of daily global GDP and about 70 times the volume of global trade. Most of that trading is driven by financial motives rather than the exchange of goods and services. banks, hedge funds, and institutional investors moving money around the world for profit, not because anyone is buying or selling anything real. The sheer scale of the currency market is almost impossible to visualize. The US dollar is involved in nearly 90% of all foreign exchange transactions, making it by far the most traded currency in the world. The euro is a distant second, appearing in about 29% of trades, while the Japanese yen is third at 17%. The dollar's dominance is so complete that most currency trades don't happen directly. They go through the dollar first, even if neither party is American. Foreign exchange trading is done over the counter, meaning it happens directly between banks and financial institutions, rather than on a centralized exchange. This decentralized structure makes the market vast and difficult to regulate, with trading occurring through a network of dealers, brokers, and electronic platforms. The market is so large that it dwarfs every other financial market in the world. The exchange rate between two currencies is determined by a complex mix of factors, including inflation rates, interest rates, political stability, economic performance, and even market psychology. If a country has high inflation, its currency tends to lose value because its purchasing power is eroding. If a country raises interest rates, its currency often strengthens because investors seek higher returns. These factors interact in ways that are sometimes predictable and sometimes not. The concept of purchasing power parity, or PPP, is one of the oldest theories in international economics. It suggests that exchange rates should adjust so that the same basket of goods costs the same amount in different countries. If a loaf of bread costs $2 in the US and €2 in Europe, the exchange rate should be $1 to €1. If it's not, the currency is considered overvalued or undervalued. The Big Mac Index is a light-hearted take on this theory, first introduced by The Economist in 1986 as a tongue-in-cheek way to measure currency misalignment. The index compares the price of a McDonald's Big Mac burger across the world, because the burger is standardized and can be found in over 100 countries. If a Big Mac costs more in Switzerland than in the US, it suggests the Swiss franc is overvalued. As of the most recent survey, a Big Mac in Switzerland cost the equivalent of just over $8, more than 40% pricier than the United States. In Taiwan, by contrast, a Big Mac was about 60% cheaper, suggesting the Taiwanese dollar was significantly undervalued. The index has become a widely cited reference for understanding currency values, though economists acknowledge it has limited predictive power. The index has a major limitation. It doesn't account for differences in labor costs, rent, and local supply chains. A Big Mac in Switzerland costs more partly because Swiss workers earn higher wages and Swiss rent is more expensive. Still, the index is a useful approximation, and it has a devoted following among economists and the public. The Egyptian pound has been a notable exception to the theory. A decade ago, a Big Mac in Cairo was significantly cheaper than in New York, which should have predicted a rise in the pound. Instead, the pound continued to weaken, and even adjusting for GDP per person, an Egyptian Big Mac still costs about half the US price. It's a reminder that exchange rates don't always follow economic theory. The US dollar remains the world's primary reserve currency, with central banks holding about 58% of all foreign exchange reserves in dollars, more than $6.5 trillion as of the end of 2025. The euro is second with about 20%, while the Japanese yen, British pound, and Chinese yuan trail far behind. The dollar's share has declined slightly over time, but no single currency has emerged as a clear replacement. The dollar's status as the dominant currency is supported by the size of the U.S. economy, the depth of U.S. Treasury markets, and its central role in global trade and finance. Nearly all major commodities, including oil, copper, wheat, and industrial metals, are priced in dollars, which makes it easier to compare prices across countries. A Colombian exporter might not want Korean won, but both will accept U.S. dollars. The U.S. dollar accounts for the majority of export invoicing in the Asia-Pacific region, the Americas, and much of the developing world. This means that when companies trade across borders, They often use dollars, even if neither country is the United States. The dollar is, in many ways, the world's default currency. Currency exchange rates are constantly fluctuating, with the US dollar rising and falling against the euro, the yen, and other currencies over the decades. A strong dollar makes imports cheaper, but exports more expensive, while a weak dollar does the opposite. These fluctuations have enormous consequences for global trade, investment, and inflation. The smallest denomination of currency in circulation is the halala in Saudi Arabia, worth about 0.0003 US cents. 100 halalas make 1 Saudi riyal. The halala is a coin that is barely worth anything, but it remains in circulation as a matter of tradition and practicality. It's a reminder that not all currencies are created equal. The largest denomination in circulation is the $10,000 note in Brunei, worth about 7,400 US dollars. The note is rarely used in everyday transactions, but exists for high-value transfers. It's a reminder that currency denominations vary widely around the world. The foreign exchange market is so large and so liquid that it is virtually impossible for any single entity to manipulate it, though central banks can intervene to stabilize their currencies. A central bank can buy or sell its own currency to influence its value, but these interventions are usually temporary. The market is simply too big for any one player to control. Currency trading is done in currency pairs, with each trade involving the simultaneous purchase of one currency and sale of another. The most traded pair is Euro/USD, the euro and the US dollar, accounting for about 28% of all trades. This pair is followed by USD/JPY, GBP USD, and USD CNY, reflecting the dominance of the dollar. The average daily volume in North American foreign exchange markets was $1.3 trillion in October 2025, according to the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. This represents a significant portion of global trading activity, with New York being one of the 3 major trading centers, along with London and Tokyo. The foreign exchange market operates continuously because trading centers in different time zones overlap. London overlaps with New York in the morning, and Tokyo overlaps with London in the afternoon. This overlap creates periods of high liquidity and low spreads, making trading more efficient. The market never really stops, except for weekends. The market has changed dramatically over the past 3 decades, with trading volumes growing from 12 times global GDP in 1992 to 30 times in 2025. This growth reflects financial deepening and the greater involvement of non-bank financial institutions in foreign exchange markets. Trading for financial motives has come to dominate trading for the exchange of goods and services. The April 2025 surge in trading volume was partly driven by the U.S. tariff announcements early in the month, which caused heightened volatility and a depreciation of the dollar. The spike in spot and forward trading was an estimated $1.5 trillion above the prevailing trend. It was a reminder that political events can have an immediate impact on currency markets. Financial customers turned to forwards and options to hedge their dollar exposures in April 2025, in addition to traditional FX swaps. By contrast, interbank FX swap trading stagnated, while interbank forwards gained traction. Dealers relied more on intragroup trading to manage risk and matched a larger share of client trades internally. The Bank for International Settlements conducts a triennial central bank survey of foreign exchange markets, providing the most comprehensive data on global trading activity. The latest survey, conducted in April 2025, showed global average daily turnover of $9.5 trillion. The survey is the gold standard for understanding the size and structure of the market. In Finland, the average daily FX turnover was $10.1 billion in April 2025, a 31% increase from 2022. In Finland, the euro was the most traded currency, followed by the dollar, reflecting the country's ties to the European market. The pattern varies by region. The exchange rate between 2 currencies is quoted as a price. how much of one currency is needed to buy one unit of another. If the exchange rate for Euro/USD is 1.10, it means 1 euro can buy $1.10. A rise in the exchange rate means the euro has strengthened relative to the dollar, and a fall means it has weakened. Currency traders make money by buying a currency when they think it will rise in value and selling it when they think it will fall. This is a form of speculation, and it accounts for a significant portion of daily trading volume. The speculation can be short-term, with traders holding positions for minutes or hours, or long-term, with positions held for months or years. The foreign exchange market is also used for hedging, protecting against potential losses from adverse currency movements. An importer who expects to pay in dollars in 6 months can buy dollars now to lock in the exchange rate, protecting themselves from a potential rise in the dollar. Hedging is a rational response to currency uncertainty. Currency exchange is a business that has been around for centuries, with money changers operating in marketplaces across the world. The ancient Greeks and Romans had money changers who exchanged coins from different city-states and empires. The business of currency exchange is as old as money itself, and somewhere, in a trading room in London or New York or Tokyo, a trader is buying dollars against yen based on the latest inflation data, moving millions of dollars with a few keystrokes. The exchange rate changes by a fraction of a percent, and a profit is made or lost in seconds. It is a quiet, invisible dance that happens millions of times a day, shaping the value of every currency on Earth. People often spend more when paying with a credit card than with cash, a phenomenon known as the pain of payment, and it's one of the most studied effects in behavioral economics. When you hand over physical bills, you feel the loss more acutely than when you simply swipe a piece of plastic. The act of paying with cash is tangible and immediate, while credit cards create a psychological distance between the purchase and the payment. The sunk cost fallacy causes people to continue investing in something because they've already spent money on it, even when it would be better to cut their losses. If you've paid for a movie ticket and the film is terrible, you might stay to the end because you don't want to waste the money. But the money is gone either way, and staying doesn't get it back. People are more likely to spend money on a product if the price ends in 99 cents, a phenomenon called charm pricing that has been used by retailers for over a century. The left-digit effect means that we perceive $9.99 as significantly cheaper than $10, even though the difference is just a penny. The brain processes the first digit more quickly, and that initial impression sticks. The endowment effect means people value things they own more than things they don't, even if they are objectively the same. If you were given a mug, you would likely demand more money to sell it than you would be willing to pay to buy it. Ownership changes the way we evaluate things, a quirk that has been demonstrated in countless experiments. People are more likely to save money if they have a specific goal, like a vacation or a purchase, rather than saving for the abstract future, because concrete goals feel more real and achievable. The brain responds to specificity, and a target gives saving a purpose. Vague intentions are easily abandoned. The mental accounting theory, first named by economist Richard Thaler, suggests that people treat money differently depending on where it comes from, violating the basic economic principle of fungibility. If you receive a tax refund, you might feel free to spend it on something extravagant, even though it's just money that you overpaid to the government. The source of the money matters, even when it shouldn't. People are more likely to tip when the bill is paid in cash than with a card, because the transaction feels more personal and immediate. The act of leaving a few dollars on the table feels different from adding a tip to a credit card receipt. It's a small psychological difference that has real economic consequences. The willingness to pay for a product depends on how it is framed. A discount feels better than a surcharge for the same price, even if the final amount is identical. The brain responds differently to the word discount than to the word surcharge, even when the math is the same. It's a framing effect that marketers use constantly. People tend to spend money more freely when they are in a good mood, and save more when they are feeling anxious, a connection that is both intuitive and well documented. The emotional state influences the financial state, and the cycle feeds back on itself. It's a reminder that money is never just about numbers. The famous marshmallow test, in which children who could delay eating one marshmallow to get two later, has been correlated with better financial outcomes in adulthood. The ability to delay gratification in childhood predicts success in managing money later in life. It's a simple test that reveals something deep about human nature. People are more likely to buy something if the price is presented as a loss, if they feel they are missing out on a deal, a principle known as loss aversion. The fear of losing out on a bargain is more powerful than the promise of gaining a good price. It's a psychological asymmetry that drives a lot of purchasing decisions. The economic man theory, that people make rational decisions based on self-interest, is largely false, and humans are emotional and irrational with money, a fact that has been demonstrated repeatedly in behavioral economics. The rational actor model is a useful simplification, but it doesn't describe how people actually behave. Humans are complex creatures who make decisions for reasons they often don't understand themselves. In the psychology of money, researchers have found that money is, in and of itself, inert, but everywhere it becomes empowered with special meanings and unusual powers. Money is a social convention, and people's attitudes toward it are determined in part by what they collectively think everyone else's response will be. The meaning of money is created by shared expectations. The mental accounting concept suggests that people do not treat money as fungible or mutually interchangeable, and instead link their spending to particular budgets. This means that a dollar earned from work is treated differently from a dollar won in a lottery, even though both have the same purchasing power. The source of money affects how it is spent. One famous example of mental accounting involves tax refunds. People often regard them as found money and feel free to spend them on discretionary items, when in fact the money rightfully belonged to the individual in the first place. A tax refund is simply a restoration of overpaid tax, not a gift. But the way it's framed changes the way people spend it. Another example involves bonuses. Employees often see bonuses as separate from regular income and spend them on unnecessary expenses like cars or vacations. Before spending a bonus, employees should compare the expenses with what the money could alternatively be spent on. The label bonus seems to authorize spending that regular income doesn't. Lottery winners often go bankrupt shortly after receiving their prize because they spend their fortune on dubious purchases that are only justified by the unmerited prize. If the fortune had been spent in line with the financial plan they had before the win, they would have earned returns on their investments. The sudden wealth creates a psychological shift that undermines good judgment. In investing, mental accounting can lead to irrational decisions. Investors often divide their assets between safe portfolios and speculative ones, believing they can isolate risk. But the difference in net wealth is zero, regardless of how many portfolios they hold, and the separation is entirely psychological. It's a costly illusion of control. The loss aversion effect, first described by Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky, explains why investors often sell winning stocks while holding on to losers. The pain of realizing a loss is too much to bear, so they avoid it by selling the winner instead. The losing stock continues to decline, and the investor loses more money in the long run. Many people maintain a savings account earning little or no interest while simultaneously carrying credit card debt with double-digit interest rates, a classic mental accounting error. They treat the savings as too important to use for debt repayment, but the math says they would be better off using the savings to pay off the debt. The psychology overrules the arithmetic. Researchers have shown that simply activating the concept of money can make people feel more self-sufficient and behave accordingly. In one study, participants who were primed with money-related concepts were less likely to help others, demonstrating that money can reduce social connection. The presence of money changes behavior in subtle ways. Money has been one of the most neglected topics in psychology, despite its importance in everyday life. Freud directed attention to the unconscious symbols money represents, while behaviorists have tried to show how monetary behaviors are learned and maintained. The topic is finally receiving more attention. Psychologists are interested in how and why different groups of people use money differently, while economists tend to study aggregated data and macroeconomic models. Individual differences are error variance for economists, but are the subject of psychology. The two disciplines approach money from fundamentally different perspectives. The acceptability of openly seeking money varies at particular historical moments. From the 1980s to around 2005, it seemed socially acceptable to talk about wanting money, but after the 2008 crash, such talk became vulgar. The cultural context influences how people express their money-related desires. It's a social convention, not a fixed truth. In many cultures, money remains a taboo topic, and it appears to be impolite to discuss and debate it openly. This cultural silence makes it harder to learn good financial habits and easier to make mistakes. The taboo around money is itself a psychological phenomenon. Fairy tales and folklore in many cultures have stories about wealth, but they often present two different narratives, one where money is a reward for a good life, and one where it destroys the person who amasses it. These stories shape how people think about money, often in contradictory ways. The cultural stories we tell about money become the stories we live by. The scientific study of money is important for two main reasons. First, money is a very large fact in the lives of everyone who lives in a modern economy. And second, the way we respond to that fact makes a difference in our lives. Understanding how people think about money is not just an academic exercise, it has real consequences. The first modern banks were not born in London or New York, but in Italy, during the Middle Ages, and they were often started by merchants who needed a safe place to store their coins. The Medici family, who were wool merchants and bankers in Florence, helped establish banking as a respected profession and created a network of branches across Europe. Their bank, which operated in the 15th century, is often considered one of the first truly international financial institutions. The term bank itself comes from the Italian word banco, which means bench, because early Italian moneylenders conducted their business from wooden benches in marketplaces. If a banker went bankrupt, his bench was broken, a practice that gave us the word bankrupt. The first central bank in the world is widely considered to be the Bank of Sweden, established in 1668, and it is still in operation today. It was originally called the Riksbank, and it was created to stabilize the Swedish currency and to act as a lender to the government. It was a model for the central banks that would follow. The Bank of England was established in 1694, and it is one of the oldest central banks in the world, serving as the model for many other central banks. It was founded to raise money for the English government during the 9 Years' War, and it quickly became the cornerstone of the British financial system. It's a quiet institution that has been at the center of British finance for over 3 centuries. The Federal Reserve System, the central bank of the United States, was established in 1913, following a series of financial panics that highlighted the need for a central authority. It was created to provide the country with a more stable and flexible financial system, and it has been a central part of the U.S. economy ever since. It was a response to crisis, not a theoretical exercise. The first stock exchange was established in Amsterdam in 1602, and it was created by the Dutch East India Company to allow investors to buy and sell shares in the company. The exchange was a place where merchants could trade shares, and it quickly became a hub of financial activity. It was the birthplace of modern stock trading. The New York Stock Exchange was established in 1792 with the signing of the Buttonwood Agreement, under which 24 stockbrokers agreed to trade securities on a commission basis. The agreement was signed under a buttonwood tree on Wall Street, and it marked the beginning of what would become the largest stock exchange in the world. It was a small beginning for a massive institution. The London Stock Exchange, one of the oldest in the world, was established in 1698. though its roots go back to the coffee houses of the 17th century where merchants and brokers would meet to trade. The exchange was formalized over time, and it became a central part of the British financial system. It was the heart of the British Empire's financial network. The first credit union was established in Germany in 1852 by Friedrich Wilhelm Raiffeisen, who designed it to help farmers access credit and improve their economic conditions. The idea was to create a cooperative that pooled the savings of its members and lent money to those in need. It was a community-based alternative to traditional banking. The first insurance company in the modern sense was established in London in 1688, and it was designed to insure merchant ships against the risks of piracy and shipwreck. The company was called Lloyd's of London, and it began as a coffee house where merchants, shipowners, and insurers would meet to discuss shipping news and underwrite policies. It grew into one of the world's leading insurance markets. The first mutual fund was established in the Netherlands in 1774, and it was called Eendracht maakt macht, which translates to Unity creates strength. It was designed to allow small investors to pool their money and diversify their risk across multiple investments. It was a quiet innovation that would transform investing. The first bond was issued in 12th century Venice, and it was a government bond called a Montes, which was used to finance the city's wars. Investors would buy shares in the first Montes, and the government would use the proceeds to fund military campaigns. Montes were an early form of government debt, a quiet precursor to the modern bond market. The first known bank was the Temple of the Goddess. The phrase temple banking refers to how early temples stored valuables, but we do not connect this to any mythology. These temples were simply the safest places to store wealth, and they functioned as banks in practice. It's a reminder that the function of banking is older than the word itself. The first modern banking institutions were established in Italy during the Middle Ages, often by families like the Medici, who combined commerce with finance. These banks offered loans, exchanged currencies, and provided a safe place for merchants to deposit their funds. They were the direct ancestors of today's banks. The Bank of Amsterdam was established in 1609, and it was a precursor to modern central banking, acting as a stable bank that held deposits and made loans. It was a model of stability and efficiency, and it was widely emulated by other countries. It was a quiet pioneer of modern financial systems. The practice of fractional reserve banking, where banks hold only a fraction of their deposits in reserve and lend out the rest, has its roots in the early banking practices of goldsmiths. Goldsmiths would accept deposits of gold and issue receipts, which began to circulate as money. The goldsmiths eventually realized they could lend out the gold that was rarely withdrawn, and the practice of fractional reserve banking was born. It was a quiet innovation that transformed the nature of money. The concept of limited liability, where investors are only responsible for the amount they have invested in a company, was developed in the 19th century to encourage investment. Before limited liability, investors were personally responsible for all debts of a company, which made investment risky. The introduction of limited liability was a game changer for corporate finance. The separation of commercial banking and investment banking, a principle enshrined in the U.S. Glass-Steagall Act of 1933, was a response to the stock market crash of 1929. The act prevented commercial banks from engaging in investment banking activities, aiming to protect depositors from the risks of the stock market. The separation lasted for decades before being repealed in 1999. Cattle are often considered the first form of currency, and they were used as a store of value and as payment for thousands of years. In ancient societies, wealth was measured in herds, and the word pecuniary comes from the Latin pecunia, which derives from pecus, meaning cattle. The connection between cows and cash is so old that it's woven into the language itself, a quiet reminder that money was once something that moved. The cowrie shell, from a sea snail, was one of the most widely used currencies in the world for over 2,000 years, circulating across Africa, Asia, and Oceania. The shells were small, portable, and almost impossible to counterfeit, and they appeared in standard weights. King Gezo of Dahomey once said he preferred cowries to gold because he would always receive a fair price. The loonie is the Canadian $1 coin, and it features a common loon, a bird found throughout Canada's lakes and rivers. The coin was introduced in 1987, and it quickly became a national symbol, affectionately named after the bird that appears on its reverse. The loon is a quiet, elegant bird, and it has become one of the most recognizable images on Canadian currency. The toonie is the Canadian $2 coin, and it features a polar bear on its reverse, a powerful symbol of the Canadian Arctic. The coin was introduced in 1996, and it replaced the $2 bill, which had been in circulation since 1986. The polar bear is a striking image on the coin's gold-colored center. The Australian 50-cent coin features a kangaroo and an emu, two native animals that are iconic symbols of the country. The kangaroo is a marsupial that is found throughout Australia, and the emu is a large flightless bird that is native to the continent. They are a reminder of the unique wildlife that sets Australia apart. The New Zealand $1 coin features a kiwi, the national bird of New Zealand, a small, flightless bird that is found only on the islands. The kiwi is a shy, nocturnal bird, and it has become a symbol of New Zealand's unique natural heritage. The coin is a quiet tribute to a creature that is found nowhere else on Earth. The South African 5-rand coin features a wildebeest, one of the country's iconic animals that roams the savanna in large herds. The wildebeest is a powerful, graceful animal, and it is a symbol of the African wilderness. The coin is a reminder of the continent's rich biodiversity. The Swiss 5-franc coin features a mountain goat, the ibex, native to the Alps, a sure-footed animal that lives at high altitudes. The ibex is a symbol of the Swiss mountains, and it has been featured on Swiss coins for over a century. It is a quiet emblem of the country's rugged landscape. In medieval England, sheep were sometimes used as currency, and a sheep could be traded for goods, a practice that was common in rural communities. The sheep was a valuable animal, providing wool, meat, and milk, and it was a practical form of wealth. It was a currency that grazed in the fields. In Kenya, the Maasai community uses cattle as a form of currency and status symbol, and cattle form a key part of the family's wealth. When a Maasai man wants to marry, he must pay a dowry of 10 or 20 cows, and a boy is not considered a man until he has a substantial number of cattle. The cattle are a living currency, a measure of wealth that is passed down through generations. The bear market and bull market terms for stock markets come from the behavior of animals. Bears swipe down and bulls charge up, a metaphor that has been used for centuries. A bear market is a declining market, where prices fall, and a bull market is a rising one, where prices climb. The animals represent the direction of the market's movement. In the Philippines, the new polymer banknotes feature iconic wildlife, including the Philippine eagle on the 1,000 peso bill, the Visayan spotted deer on the 500 peso bill, the Palawan peacock pheasant on the 100 peso bill, and the Visayan leopard cat on the 50 peso bill. The banknotes also feature native orchids, making the currency a celebration of the country's biodiversity. It's a quiet tribute to the natural world. Globally, almost 1 in 6 banknotes from 207 countries feature native wildlife, and more than 30% of the animals depicted are threatened species. Birds and mammals dominate the imagery, making up 83% of all wildlife on banknotes. The animals on money are often the animals that need help. In South Africa, the Reserve Bank links the iconic Big Five animals on their banknotes to its core values. The rhino represents accountability, the buffalo represents unity, the elephant represents stability, the lion represents leadership, and the leopard represents integrity. The animals are not just images, they are symbols of the nation's aspirations. In Fiji, the 2012 Flora and Fauna currency featured threatened species. and the community now refers to the notes by the animals on them, asking for a kulawai instead of $5. It's a quiet reminder that animals can become part of the language of money, embedded in the way people talk about value. On the island of Yap, large stone discs called rye stones were used as currency, and they were so heavy that they were rarely moved. The ownership of a stone was established not by its physical location but by its history, which was recorded in oral tradition. It was a form of money that was completely immobile, a currency that never changed hands. Tea bricks were used as currency in China, Mongolia, Siberia, Tibet, and Russia for over 1,000 years, and they had the advantage of being both a useful commodity and a store of value. The bricks were made by pressing tea leaves into solid blocks that could be transported easily and used as a form of payment. It was a fragrant currency, a quiet companion to the day's work. Squirrel pelts were used as currency in some parts of North America, where furs were valuable and widely traded, and beaver pelts became the standard of trade in Canada by 1748. The beaver was hunted so extensively that it was almost driven to extinction. It was a currency that was hunted out of existence. Wampum, shell beads woven into strings or belts, were used as money by Native American tribes in the northeastern United States and eastern Canada, and they were highly valued for their beauty and durability. The beads were made from the shells of clams and whelks, and they were used for trade and to record treaties. It was a currency that told stories. The long-tailed macaques at Uluwatu Temple in Bali have learned to steal tourists' phones, wallets, and sunglasses and trade them back for food, a form of economic behavior that resembles early currency exchange. The monkeys can distinguish between high-value objects like smartphones and low-value items like hats, and they will hold out for a better reward. It's a quiet reminder that the ability to trade is not uniquely human. Studies have shown that capuchin monkeys can recognize token validity and engage in chains of reverse and direct exchanges, suggesting that some features of money may be traceable to the exchange habits of non-human animals. The monkeys can trade a token for food and then trade the food for a token, a behavior that resembles simple currency exchange. It's a reminder that the roots of money may be deeper than we think. In the Solomon Islands, a shark-tooth sword, made from 30 pairs of shark teeth, was used as commodity money, and today, the teeth provide an ecological snapshot of the reefs that lined the islands more than a century ago. The teeth are a time capsule of an ecosystem that has since been lost. It's a currency that has become a record of history. In Brazil, among the various commodity monies used were cowries brought from Africa, Brazil wood, sugar, cocoa, tobacco, and cloth, each reflecting the local economy. The cloth was traded in the form of yarn balls, skeins, and fabrics, a practical currency that could be used for clothing. It was a textile currency, a reminder that money could be made of almost anything. The beaver fever in Canada, when the beaver was almost driven to extinction by the fur trade, is a quiet reminder that using animals as currency can have consequences for the animals themselves. The beaver has since recovered, and it was given official status as an emblem of Canada in 1975. It's a currency that survived its own extinction. The use of cattle as money began around 9000 BC, making it one of the oldest forms of currency, and it has left its mark on language and culture around the world. The word capital comes from the Latin capita, meaning head as in a head of cattle, and fee comes from Old English feo, which meant cattle. The language of money is still rooted in the animal kingdom, and somewhere, in a field in Kenya, a Maasai pastoralist is counting his cattle, his wealth measured in living, breathing animals that provide milk, meat, and status. The cattle move slowly across the savanna, grazing on the grass, and they are more valuable than any coin or bill. It is a quiet reminder that money, in its oldest form, is alive. The first digital currency was created in the 1980s and was called DigiCash, but it failed to gain traction because it was ahead of its time. The system required special software and was too complex for most people to use, and it ultimately went bankrupt. It was a quiet pioneer that paved the way for the digital currencies that would follow decades later. Bitcoin was created in 2009, and it was the first decentralized cryptocurrency, designed to operate without any central authority. The identity of its creator, Satoshi Nakamoto, remains unknown to this day, adding an air of mystery to the origin of the first successful cryptocurrency. It was a quiet beginning for what would become a global phenomenon. There are now over 10,000 cryptocurrencies in existence, though most of them are not widely used and have very little value. The vast majority are obscure projects with tiny user bases, and they come and go with little fanfare. It's a crowded field, but only a handful have any real influence. The total market capitalization of all cryptocurrencies fluctuates wildly from day to day, but it has reached about $2.5 trillion at its peak. The value can swing by billions of dollars in a single day, driven by speculation and news events. It's a volatile market that is not for the faint of heart. About 90% of the world's currency exists only as digital entries in computer systems, and less than 10% is physical cash. Most money is just numbers on a screen, stored in bank accounts and transferred electronically. The physical money that we handle is a small fraction of the total. The first transaction using Bitcoin was in 2010, when a programmer paid 10,000 Bitcoins for 2 pizzas, a transaction that would be worth hundreds of millions of dollars today. The programmer, Laszlo Hanyecz, wanted to prove that Bitcoin could be used for real purchases, and he bought 2 Papa John's pizzas for about $25. The pizzas were expensive in hindsight, but they were a quiet milestone in the history of digital money. The use of cash has been declining steadily, and in the US, cash payments accounted for only about 19% of transactions in 2022. The decline has been driven by the convenience of cards and mobile payments, and it has accelerated during the pandemic. Cash is becoming less relevant in everyday transactions. China has the world's largest central bank digital currency, the ECNY, or digital yuan, which is being used in pilot cities across the country. The ECNY is designed to replace some of the cash in circulation and to give the government more control over the money supply. It's a quiet experiment that could reshape the global financial system. Sweden is the most cashless country in the world, with only about 9% of payments made in cash, and the country is moving rapidly toward a fully digital economy. The Swedish central bank has been exploring a digital krona, and the use of cash has become so rare that many shops simply don't accept it. It's a quiet revolution that is happening in real time. The US Federal Reserve has studied the idea of a digital dollar, but it is not currently in development, and the current administration has ruled out a CBDC. The Federal Reserve has published research on the potential benefits and risks, but it has not moved to implement a digital currency. The US is taking a cautious approach. The first ATM in the world was installed in London in 1967, and the number of ATMs is now declining as digital payments grow. The ATM was a revolutionary invention that allowed people to access cash at any time, but it is now being replaced by mobile payments and digital transfers. The ATM is a quiet relic of a cash-based world. By 2030, it is estimated that more than 90% of all payments will be made digitally, and cash is becoming increasingly rare. The trend is driven by convenience, efficiency, and the growing acceptance of digital payments. It's a quiet shift that is happening gradually. The Genius Act, signed into law in the US in July 2025, was the first federal law regulating stablecoins, providing guardrails for their use, and encouraging companies to issue them. The law was a significant victory for the crypto industry, and it has been praised as a once-in-a-generation opportunity to expand dollar dominance through digital finance. It was a quiet turning point in the regulation of digital money. Stablecoins are a type of digital cash that is pegged one-to-one with sovereign currencies like the dollar, and they are designed to combine the benefits of crypto with the stability of traditional money. The idea is that a stablecoin is a digital representation of a dollar, backed by reserves of cash and treasuries. They are a quiet bridge between the old world and the new. The push for stablecoins in the US has been driven by a desire to maintain the dollar's dominance as the global reserve currency, particularly in the face of China's ECNY. The dollar-based stablecoins are re-dollarizing the global economy, making the dollar even more central to international transactions. It's a quiet geopolitical contest for the future of money. The US dollar is involved in nearly 90% of all foreign exchange transactions, and dollar-backed stablecoins are only reinforcing that dominance. The stablecoins are used for everything from trading to cross-border payments, and they are making the dollar even more ubiquitous. It's a quiet reinforcement of the dollar's position. The battle over the future of money is playing out between crypto companies and Wall Street banks, with each side pushing for a different vision of how payments should work. The crypto companies want stablecoins to be a core part of the financial system, while banks are wary of the competition. It's a quiet struggle that will shape the future of finance. The European Union is taking a different approach, pushing for a central bank digital currency, the digital euro, as a counterweight to the dollar-based stablecoins. The digital euro is designed to be a public safe asset that can be used for payments, and it is a response to the fear that stablecoins could displace the euro. It's a quiet defensive move. In Australia, the Reserve Bank and Treasury are jointly exploring a retail CBDC, and a follow-up paper is due in 2027. The project is still in the research phase, and the government would need to pass legislation to introduce a digital currency. It's a quiet exploration of what the future might hold. China has been the most aggressive in pursuing a CBDC, and the ECNY is being tested for cross-border payments through a project called M-Bridge. The ECNY could be used to bypass dollar channels and the SWIFT system, giving China more control over its international transactions. It's a quiet challenge to the dollar's dominance. The discussion around digital currencies has been complicated by privacy concerns, with some people worried about government surveillance and the loss of anonymity. Cash is anonymous, but digital money is traceable, and that traceability has raised concerns about privacy. It's a quiet tension that will not be resolved easily. Many economists and central bankers believe that a cashless society is inevitable, but they also recognize that the transition must be handled carefully. The phasing out of cash would need to be gradual, with provisions for the poor, the elderly, and the unbanked. It's a quiet recognition that change must be managed. The concept of programmable money is one of the most exciting possibilities of digital currencies, where money can be programmed to do specific things automatically. A payment could be made only when certain conditions are met, or a salary could be paid in real time. It's a quiet vision of a future where money is more intelligent. AI agents are expected to become major users of stablecoins, conducting millions of transactions automatically without any human involvement. This could lead to a massive increase in the velocity of money, as machines trade and transact at speeds that humans cannot match. It's a quiet glimpse into a future that is already beginning to emerge. The idea of a full reserve banking system, where every dollar issued is backed by a dollar in reserve, is a key principle of stablecoins like USDC. This is a departure from the fractional reserve system used by traditional banks, where only a fraction of deposits are held in reserve. It's a quiet shift in how money is created and backed. The future of money is not going to be a revolution, but an evolution, a gradual shift from physical to digital that has been happening for decades. The changes are incremental, but they are profound, reshaping the way we think about value and exchange. It's a quiet transformation that will continue for years to come. The geopolitics of digital currencies is becoming a central concern, with countries competing to control the future of money. The US wants to maintain dollar dominance through stablecoins, China wants to challenge that dominance with its ECNY, and Europe wants to carve out a middle path with the digital euro. It's a quiet contest that will define the next era of global finance. And somewhere, in a server farm in Virginia or a data center in Shanghai, A computer is processing a transaction that is entirely digital, with no physical money involved. The transaction is fast, cheap, and invisible, a quiet exchange of value that represents the future of money. It's a future that is already here, quietly happening, one transaction at a time. And somewhere, in a vault in West Point, or a drawer in a desk, or a coin jar on a kitchen counter, a single coin rests. It was minted on a particular day, in a particular press, and it has made its way to wherever it is now. It will never leave the earth. It will just wait, like these facts were waiting. Good night.